Tēnā koutou katoa. Nā mā haere mai, welcome to the resumption of our council meeting. We're continuing from last Wednesday, I think it was, Wednesday the 17th of November. And we've got a few items that are still needing to be transacted. So I'll run through the order of business in a moment. I don't have any additional apologies from the start of the meeting. I think everybody is here. We're just missing Councillor Skinner, but I haven't had an apology from him, so he can't be too far away, presumably. Yes, we've already had an apology from Councillor Edgar, so we don't need to re-receive that. The order of business that we've got left, we were on the adoption of the Climate Action Plan matter, so we'll finish that one. Then we'll go to the carbon credit potential from a council Indigenous forest item, and we'll do that one. And then we'll go to the recommendation from 4 November for the Whakamahari Whakatū Nelson Plan Programme. And that's the recommendation from the committee, I believe. So anything that we need to know today, we have got some external people joining us. I think I'm right in that for the carbon credit potential from Council Indigenous Forest item. Yes, we do. So they will be joining us at the right time. And we had on Wednesday, we have a motion on the table moved by Councillor Fulton and seconded by Councillor Courtney. And I invited the officers to look at that motion because it's important that we receive advice before we make decisions. So that was sitting as a motion of council. Russ McDonald and Daniela have helpfully put together some staff responses. So they've given just the views around those matters. That has been tabled. So you've got that on. You should have a tabled document with you today. Has everyone got that? All right, thank you. Now, subsequent to the motion that was moved and seconded on Wednesday, Councillor Fulton has reflected on the officers' concerns around time frame and a number of other matters, and has prepared an updated recommendation that has been viewed by Councillor Courtney, who supports that. And they were, I'll just go to Councillor Fulton to speak to whether you'd like to have the opportunity to proceed with your updated motion, in which case we'll have to do some procedural motions to allow what was moved and seconded on Wednesday to be withdrawn, and then the alternative to be substituted. And councillors may want a moment to have a look at that before they make that decision. So Councillor Fulton, I'll cross to you. I think it would be preferable that we do use the updated one because it reflects some of the advice that we've had from the officers, but I'll cross to you.
Based on the officer advice, the recommendation I'd made last week, I believe could be delivered by the 1st of December, as a lot of the feedback I've been requesting for quite some time. The officers have advised that will take quite a lot more time. So the new recommendation allows the governance oversight group to deliver that by February, March next year. So it allows the Christmas and summer break to get that piece of work completed, and then hopefully we'll have an interim climate plan which we can workshop with the councillors, and then develop that further into a final climate plan for July next year. So sort of a two-stage approach whereby we spend the next couple of months getting the themes incorporated and the vision and values and principles incorporated using a governance oversight group, and then we bring that back, we adopt that, and then we go through another iteration process and talk to the community and get a new climate plan completed by July.
Thank you. So what's on the screen is not what Councillor Fulton has amended. So that's the one from last week. That's correct. So well, councillors, I think it will be worth you having a look at what's being developed. So I think what we'll do is take a brief adjournment so that the elected members can get a hard copy of what you've developed.
Yeah.
And then we can see if they want to proceed with, allowing this one to be withdrawn, and that will need a 75% majority to allow that to happen, and then allow the next one to come in so that you can then work your way through whether you want to move with that one or not. So I'll take a brief adjournment, allow some time for the distribution of the Thank you. We'll just resume our meeting. Just had a brief adjournment to provide an opportunity for the elected members to read a table document, which is a suite of clauses recommendation updating the motion that was presented from the motion for Wednesday. So, Councillor Fulton, I will come back to you now. So, just in terms of the officers have had an opportunity, elected members have had an opportunity to read that, and the officers may also have some comment on that if it becomes a live issue. But we've got a few steps to go to get there. So, I'll come back to you, and you could just talk to if your request is now to replace what was on Wednesday with this one, then we'll just have to have a vote to allow that to happen, and then we'll come into the substantive part, which is then to decide whether you want to support that or not. My preference is that we do move, as chair, my preference is that we do have a substantive debate on this one, because I think it's a far more achievable and better better the work that has gone into the climate action plan to date, and that gets adopted. So I think that's the better option from my point of view. But I'll go to Councillor Fulton. I'll just see if Councillor Fulton wants to add anything further, and I'll open for questions.
No, I don't think so. So in terms of procedure, the intention is that myself and Councillor Courtney would withdraw the existing recommendation on the table. That would require 75%.
I misinformed you before. Just a majority.
Oh, just a majority vote. So it just requires a majority vote. But the intention is to withdraw it, and then this recommendation replaces it. And however, Councillor Courtney and myself can't move and second this recommendation. So we would be seeking other people in the room to please do that. Is that?
Just a moment, Councillor Fulton. I might not have got that bit quite right either. I'm going to the Brains Trust on my left.
I'm a little surprised that we can't just replace it, because normally we do.
Yeah, so the meeting, by a majority vote, can agree to substitute the motion.
Oh, that's easy.
Okay,
that's great.
Excellent. That's what we normally do.
Elaine. That was what I was just a bit confused when I got those.
Okay, so then we can remain. Okay, so if everyone was happy with us to replace the recommendation from the meeting last Thursday by majority vote, then we can replace it, and myself and Councillor Courtney remain the mover and seconder. Okay, that would be far more.
That sounds fabulous. Thank you, Brains Trust. That's great. Right, that's better. Okay, so any questions? I'm open for questions. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you. So I don't doubt that a huge amount of thought and care has gone into this, and it's been done for all the right reasons. But I go back to the meeting last week, and we heard from the Climate Forum, and we heard from Jenny Easton, who, as I think all of us, many of us have agreed, is a harsh critic, hard but fair, but she can be pretty harsh. And I asked her, if it was a movie, how many stars would she give the plan that we were looking at last week? And she said 5 stars. And I think Joanna sitting next to her was nodding in agreement. So if it was a 5-star plan, my question is, I need some reassurance that I need to know whether or not adding all this, whether or not in any way undermines what Jen Easton was so pleased to see on the council table.
Well, I can put that as in terms of intent. So is there an intent to undermine the climate action plan? No,
that's not my question, sorry. So for clarity, I'm not saying was there an intention to undermine it. Is the effect of adding these stages, adding this effectively to the plan, does that in any way undermine?
I have to ask the officers for a comment on that one.
That's what I'd like to hear from.
So, Ms McDonald.
Through the chair, I think the effect of this new proposal would be one, the time frame for getting it out would change, so it would be much slower. And the other is that the structure that Daniela has put together, a very clear 4-part structure, that would change because it needs to be pulled apart and restructured under those other headings. So it would be a different sort of document.
Sounds a little bit like a yes Through the chair, do the staff support these suggestions?
I think the staff have already spoken to that, Councillor Laurie, to say their recommendation is in the report and their view hasn't changed, correct? Yes, so that's the view.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So what we need to do is decide whether we're going to allow the substitution of what has been tabled, which sets out a longer time frame and is somewhat is allowing a working governance oversight group, but it could have another name if somebody wanted it, but you can get to that in a moment. If we're going to allow that to be substituted, because I think what Ms McDonald has done is she's tabled a document that makes it quite clear that the timeframes that were proposed from last Wednesday are really unrealistic. So that's the first step to say whether it gets there. Whether it gets to actually become a decision of council is yet to be decided. That's a whole lot. That's the next debate, Councillor Laurie. So first one is, are we prepared to allow the substitution? Can I just get an indication, please, whether we're prepared to allow that substitution? So I've got to, how do I do this? Just a fast show of hands. Are you happy to allow the substitution? I'm happy to allow the substitution. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep, that's fine. So that's substituted. So now the document that is tabled is what is up for debate. And we'll take questions first, but I probably, in the first instance, just want to go back to Ms McDonald to see if there's any additional points that you would add from what was responding to the motion from last Wednesday. Thank you.
Through the chair, yes, thank you for that opportunity. I would just make a few points. What I would say is that I think we need to be realistic about the timeline that's proposed in this reworked piece. For a start, to get that work done by the date of late February, early March, obviously council doesn't reconvene till after Waitangi Day, and so that's a period where we're not expecting councillors to be working over the summer break, and obviously staff are taking leave too, which makes it difficult. We would also, to do that in that time, because it includes the vision, purpose, values and principles, which we would normally, as I said earlier, that we would bring that to council for a workshop, get everyone's views, come back with options. So that's quite a significant piece of work, unless you are willing to accept today the wording that I think Councillor Fulton has proposed around those elements. And then the third thing, though, I would just caution council to think about iwi's involvement. So for a significant piece of work, which I think they will regard this climate change work as, they would normally expect to have input to vision, purpose, values and so on, rather than to have council adopt that and then come to them later. So just to be thinking about that. Then down further under delegates the governance oversight group, which I think is point 4, it talks about a draft action plan there. Is that a miswording?
Yeah.
I think that's a yes. There are
draft climate plan.
There are a couple of updates. I think we noted those, didn't we, Elaine? We've got
it's supposed to say draft climate plan.
yes, it is, and then I'll come to the other ones in a moment. So
thank you for that clarification. I would just say again, looking at that time frame, there's some very significant pieces of work in the bullets. For example, embodied carbon, that's quite a discussion to have with council, how we handle that, and quite a lot of work for staff to do to present something for you. And issues like just transition and climate justice. So that's a very ambitious July, early August for that to be achieved. So those would be my comments on that amendment.
Thank you, Ms Donald. Councillor Fulton, I understood that I'll go to Chief Executive and Councillor McGurk, but thank you, Nikki, and I think the intention from Councillor Fulton, just to speed this up a little bit, is at clause 6. I think there's acknowledgement that those matters, some aspects of developing the climate may occur in steps over multiple years. And I know, for instance, the embodied carbon matter is one that Councillor Sampson has raised on many occasions, and it is a really important element, but we have to be realistic that that may take some time to work its way through as it goes through perhaps some of the activity management plan processes for particularly for capital projects. So I think there's a recognition that, and the same with climate justice, they're big topics that are, and this is presumably a living document, so it'll start with perhaps some acknowledgement of those issues and then develop them up. And I think I've got that intent right.
Yes, that's certainly the intention. And look, after the meeting last week, Nikki sent me our strategic sort of framework document in terms of the timeline for that. And I would note that there was never a layout of two separate documents, that it just says climate policy. So it says climate change policy, and that work was supposed to commence in June this year. So I was certainly thought that this was the document we were working on for the year, and I do think that going back to Councillor Laurie's questions, I think that the work that Daniela has done to get it to this stage is excellent, and all of that will be used in the next iteration. So there's no loss of her great work. It is definitely going to be picked up and used, but what is missing is the narrative and some of this qualitative and quantitative sort of analysis in terms of how we measure our progress, and how we tell the story of how we create change. So certainly that's my intention, is that I appreciate it's quite a tight time frame, but I had hoped this work would have been done by now. I think I emailed back in June this feedback. So the feedback has been with staff for many months now, and I guess I'm trying to catch up rather than delay further. So I don't believe that there'll be more delays. This is an attempt to try and speed up a process which I had thought had started many months ago.
Thank you. I'm just going to go to the Chief Executive, and then Pat, did you have a comment, or do you want me to come back to you?
No,
You're fine.
no, I want to speak now.
Oh, no. Okay. Thank you.
So I'll repeat what I said last week, that there are two pieces of work, an action plan and a strategy, and that's what we've been focusing on. And yes, we got comments from Councillor Fulton some months ago, but they were not in line with the council resolutions, and there has been some backwards and forwarding since then. But in terms, and you appreciate, I've only just seen this revised resolution this morning. So I look at the pressure cooker this will put our staff under, because what we are now trying to do is combine an action plan and a strategy in one document and get it out quickly. So agrees the terms of reference by resolution 7 by the 9th of December. All the reports for that council meeting on the 9th of December have been written, checked, and going through a process. So yes, we could turn that round if it were, but that'll be a hard ask on my team. I heard the words that staff would work over the Christmas summer break. My staff are not going to work over the Christmas summer break unless it's on a COVID response, and we'll be briefing you on that this afternoon. But
sorry, Pat, I didn't hear any elected members suggesting staff working over the Christmas break. I'm sorry.
I think that if you look at the tape, you will have heard Councillor Fulton say those words this week and last week about the Christmas summer break.
Oh,
Correct.
my apologies. I'm sorry, I didn't.
I don't think I
I
specifically
think
meant
Councillor Noonan
Christmas.
saw me react to the words. Yep.
All right, okay, we'll keep on going. Apologies, I missed all of that.
And so I don't think there's any chance of reporting an interim climate plan to the Environment and Climate Committee by late February. I think then that's 3C. I think that would be more realistically June, July. And then the whole strategy, and acknowledging that it's going to be a growing piece of work, but of all those bullet points and 4, staff don't know which ones we're supposed to be getting done by quickly and which ones are going to be done over 2 or 3 years. There's no indication in that resolution, but I think that's an 18-month piece of work, because there will need to be workshops with councillors. You will need to own this document. And my final comment is, our experience with iwi is that when we rock up with a document that already includes a vision, purpose, values and principles that doesn't include their view, our relationship takes a step back. And it's one of the messages that we've been given time after time. I haven't called Panya down into the room, but I'm absolutely confident she would say the same thing. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I'll go to my list, which next up is Councillor McGurk, and then Councillor O'Neill Stevens, and Councillor Sensen.
Yes, thanks, and through Madam. Probably a couple of questions. What would be, I'll break it down in parts. What's the barrier to approving the climate action plan today going out? Because we've already had the feedback in from the Climate Forum and stakeholders there. So they're expecting, and it's almost 2 years since we passed the climate emergency. So what's the downside for passing the climate action plan today?
Well, I think we've had that answer already from the officers that their view is that it should be adopted today. That was as I understood it.
Yeah, through
There
the
is not a
chair,
downside.
I would just say, yes, there's no barrier to adopting it today. And just to add, if it reassures council that we are continuing to get really positive feedback now that the document's been on a public agenda. I mean, just this morning, Daniela passed on another email saying, thank you for the quality work, and we're looking forward to seeing what else council produces on this. And that's from someone we don't even know. So I mean, it has been positively received.
Okay, well, that takes the next one is to recognise that there's an iterative process, so there's a series of work we'll have to carry on after this. So I'm thinking that if we establish some sort of governance oversight, so we've got sort of council and you've got project governance, we'll call it a project because that's what it is. And then there's the project management and actually project work, getting the work done. So I think giving some thought about from today forward, if we pass the climate action plan today, the actions forward, how we will actually manage the delivery and the updating and the messaging of, there's legislative changes coming, there's businesses are coming on board and things like that need to be sort of incorporated in perhaps the updated and refreshed plan, which may take us 18 months, 2 years to do. Would that be a model that would work?
Through the chair, yes, that sounds very sensible. Thank you.
Councillor, any other
I'll leave it at
questions?
that.
Thank you. Councillor Neil Stevens.
Yeah, first question was just checking that I'm reading this right. We wouldn't have a council climate plan until 2022-23, is that correct?
Councillor Fulton, I think that's in terms of the officer's advice, or in terms of so it's Ms McDonald, so that's saying, how long do you think it's going to take to get to a climate?
Or just specifically within the recommend, so we wouldn't be adopting this plan as a climate plan that would come in clause 5 in 22-23. Is that, just wanting to make sure I've got the sort of intent correct?
I think the intention is to do this as an iterative process. So what Councillor Fulton has worked through with me last evening was to say, taking on board the staff's feedback, absolutely get that. As Councillor McGurk has said, there is an iterative process to roll through here. So she's actually tried to articulate that in the recommendations to adopt the document that's in today's agenda. So that gets adopted, and then it's the building block for the next steps to work the way through, noting that yes, iwi engagement will be critical, and that's noted in clause 8 to ensure that there is a Tau Māori perspective is incorporated, and that's obviously always subject to iwi approval because I'd need to decide whether they want to participate in this or not, but that may take 12 to 18 months till you get to the final version. But so Councillor Neil Stevens, that was how I've reconciled this to go. I listened to the Climate Forum members last Wednesday, and I listened to their ask that actually we annually review this, and so I saw this as actually supporting that work.
Yeah, well, that was my understanding from the conversation we had, but I just feel maybe this recommendation isn't quite reflecting that, with it saying sort of adoption in 22-23 instead of that sort of living document. Now a question for Nikki. So I guess, do staff see value in having eventually a plan that sort of captures that broader framework?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, what we see is an action plan now. We have that information. The community wants to use it. If that can be adopted and on our website, we're held accountable for it. And then the work immediately starts on that broader framework, which encompasses all of these ideas that council needs to work through.
Thank you. Councillor Sensen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through the chair. So I guess my question really is, when I look at the action plan that we are considering adopting, it looks like kind of an operational plan. It is the would that be a correct assessment, that it is all the strands of work that the council, different pillars, areas of the council have got planned for the next 10 years?
Yes, through the chair, the aim is to show the community what council has agreed to and budgeted for in terms of dollars and resource, and put it up on the website so that they can track that we're sticking to what we've said we would do.
So it is a climate, an operational climate action plan. And then I think that the next part of it, doing a strategic climate roadmap that's for council and the community, is critically important. And I guess I wouldn't want us to kind of drop the ball or lose any speed in beginning that next piece of work. And so I'm just wondering if you could, if that begins, say, next year, how likely is it, or what is the kind of time frame that you imagine for that next piece of work? I know you can't give us any exact, but I would just like to know what you kind of anticipate.
Yes, so through the chair, we have a new climate manager starting on the 13th of December, which is very exciting. So this would be a key piece of work for them to oversee. So it's not that work wouldn't start this year, they would be working on it, but we have booked it tentatively, the earliest workshop we could get in March, to get everyone in council around the table giving us feedback on that scope, how they see that strategic piece of work, and that will really help us then to develop a firmer timeline, depending on which bits of work you want to see included in that plan and which bits of work maybe are things that would get added on over some time.
And is there, if that is to happen like that, is there an opportunity for us also to kind of have iwi and some of the key community interest groups that Councillor Fulton has outlined in here, also input to that at that point, and to I think it would be very helpful for elected members to be getting some guidance also from iwi and the Climate Forum and NRDA and Nelson Marlborough Health and Forest and Bird, rather than the 13 people around this table setting the kind of strategic direction of that. We really need to hear from the.
Yes, absolutely. Through the chair, certainly I think that would be essential. Council can't deliver the outcomes we need on climate change by itself, and so bringing the community with us and agencies is essential. So certainly we've got a very close and helpful working relationship with the Climate Forum and Businesses for Climate Action, but it needs to go beyond that, as you say.
Okay, thanks. No more questions. Thanks.
Councillor Noonan.
Thank you. Following similar lines to the previous questions, the climate action plan says on page 59 that it is a living document, and that as things are complete, actions are completed, they'll be noted or amended, or new actions are added. And I'm not sure how those new actions are added, because also I can't find in the document any reviews. So I'm wondering how new things get reviewed. So if we wanted to, for example, look at some of the items on Councillor Bolton's proposal, can that be looked at a later date when it's reviewed?
So, Ms McDonald, what is the process for adding actions, or it's set out in the action plan? What was
It might be
process you were considering for doing?
Yes. Through the chair, what we were thinking, we actually thought the Climate Forum's idea of an annual review is a really good one, which would be where we would imagine we'd bring it back to council and get it signed off. But in the interim, because it's up on the website, we have that ability to put notes and say this is completed, or this timeline has stretched, or there's been some new funding agreed, so that the community can see what we're doing as we go. And then once a year, you'd get a more formal, approve the action plan through council.
So that doesn't really tell me how we add things in. Would there be and there's no timeline, would it be reviewed, or do we ask the community their thoughts on adding actions and how that might happen, and should that be in there?
Thank you. It's a good question.
Through the chair, so I mean, there's an annual plan every year where we look again at budgets and depending on the year, whether we take feedback from the community, but it's an ongoing process where we will see ideas, staff and different teams will be working those up and bringing them to council. You will get to make a decision about any new item that gets added as an action with funding. There's certainly an opportunity to consider those other elements that are in this document through the normal council process where we would bring a report or have a workshop. I'm not sure if I've answered that question yet.
I think I'm looking for a little bit more. So if the climate forum, for example, wanted to add something in, is there a regular time when they could to bring that to the council and say, oh, this has just occurred, something's changed in the world. We need to change. We would like to add that into the climate action plan and see what we can do about it. I just can't see sort of a regular check-in to go, there's an opportunity once a year for the public to submit things or the forum to submit things. I just think it would be helpful to have a review, which will then give the opportunity for other people to add in suggestions that can be looked at.
Through the chair, yes, so certainly council could direct that there's an annual review which provides an opportunity for community input as well, yes.
Would help a lot, and that gives an opportunity for these suggestions to come through as well. Didn't want to close the door.
I do feel, I'm sorry to say that I do feel like we're making this up on the fly. To be perfectly honest, I'm sorry. I just said to the chief executive, crikey, I don't know that we've got a budget for that. So what are we doing here?
So I'm envisaging that we would do an annual review, which would be reported to council, and then the council have to decide, do you want to put those in your work program and the money associated with it? Because everything in that action plan has dollars associated with it. So we would envisage there'd be some process probably tied in with an annual plan or long-term plan review, where we would specifically talk about climate change, and that would be an input into that decision-making. The council would pass resolutions, and then we would add extra items in or take items out. But all we were doing in the meantime would be updating and say, we've done this one, we've started this one, we're halfway through this one. But there will be updates, but changes would have to be by council resolution.
I think annual plan and long-term plan, that's a good suggestion. It's not in the document, so I just wondered how we would have that availability.
Well, I don't want to extend this for too long, but I hadn't envisaged it that way at all. So no, I hadn't. So what I'd seen is if this is a living document, then making the council processes, it's a living process, but it's a very quite aging process, because it's not really that flexible to pick up the kind of climate change being actually part of everything we do. And I suspect there will be operational decisions that are made. And I could think about them around procurement and other things that won't come to council for decision, but they will actually be important steps within the climate action. Well, I'd say the climate plan, no action plan, because that will be internally focused. So I would imagine there will be things like that will occur, and we'll pick them up and we'll add them in. And some of them will be little steps, but all those little steps, it's about savings. It's lots of little bits add up to lots at the end. So that's how I'm imagining that. If it's a living document, that it'll almost be that it quarterly reports to the Environment and Climate Committee, that there'll be a report in there saying, hey, look, what we've done this, in these decisions that are happening throughout council, we've found some new ways to add to the plan. So I'd kind of seen it like that. So I think, Councillor Fulton, what your question is, Councillor Improvement, what your question is highlighting is that we need to have a real buy-in from this table about what it is we're thinking around this next step. So it's probably for another day. So I don't think the action plan at the moment articulates what's in the document today, doesn't articulate the process for that. What we've had is enough of a discussion today to go, gosh, there's some things that we can do here. Some of them may, as Chief Executive said, for larger items, they'll have to come through the annual plan, but some of the operational stuff may be great just to pick up.
I think that I was just trying to work out, this doesn't belong to just the council, this belongs to the community. And I was just trying to find a way of how they would input into it. But I think the annual plan and the long-term plan is probably the right place because they're budget aligned. So I don't know whether that needs to be just noted that there is a mechanism for external input and for consideration.
I'm not even going to try and do that today. I don't think that'll have to come back to the Environment and Climate Committee for whatever we decide today. We'll need to come back to the Environment and Climate Committee for.
Can we note in the minutes that we've considered?
Yes, we can.
That.
Thank you. Elaine will come up with some magic words. All right. I'm just going to take a very brief recess for just a second. I just need to check one item and then I'll come back. So don't go away. Just then Councillor Fulton's next on the list. Anyone else wish to speak at this point? No. Thank you. Then we're going to get to the vote.
Having heard some of the questions in the room and Councillor Sampson, I thought you made some really, really helpful comments in terms of this being a climate action plan, which is more operational. So perhaps my intention was in number 2, adopts attachment A, and whether it says as an operational climate action plan or as the climate action plan. But as the Chief Executive has explained, the intention of that is that then informs a strategic framework. Now, I just want to pick up on the resolutions which the Chief Executive referred to, which are on page 46 and 47 of our agenda. And you will see that number 4 of that resolution was to develop a comprehensive council emissions reduction action plan to inform the upcoming long-term plan. So that piece of work was intended to be completed quite some time ago. This is what we have now, and we had expanded it to include community emissions and adaptation as well. So the high-level framework and the climate change, the strategic framework, which I guess the rest of this resolution is seeking, is a piece of work which was supposed to have been considered through the development of the long-term plan. So quite some months ago as well. And I'm happy if we want to change the timeline, and in no way intended to suggest that staff work over Christmas and New Year's. I apologise for that. I'm happy to change 3C to say by April 2022. My intention of that section of the resolution was that we could then workshop the piece of work because the staff had indicated that March 2022 was March 2022 was when the workshop was scheduled. So the intention was to try and workshop.
So sorry to interrupt, but just so that we can move this along. So what you would like us to change that to by April 2022.
Yeah.
Fine. And the seconder is happy with that. Councillor Courtney, are you happy with that? Thank you.
And then up in number 2, adopts attachment number as the climate action plan. So apologies, I've missed that out.
Oh, yes, true. Okay, adopts as the climate action plan. Okay, and just that's what you want to have and nothing further?
Yeah.
Do you want the recognising?
Yeah, no, that can stay there.
A living document?
So this is an action plan, and then we'll be developing a climate plan, which is the strategic framework, which will deliver to resolutions 4, sorry, 5.
Councillor Fulton, we'll just go a little bit more slowly so the government's advisors can follow. So just we'll just have a little pause. So adopts attachment. That must be the same as what's in the original, I think. Is that correct? The climate action plan. What does the recommendation say? Let's have a look, see. But you can just say adopts the climate action plan. Yes, it does. That's what it needs to say. Adopts the climate action plan. And then it has its number after it. Yep, I think that's the best way to do it, isn't it? And did you want to keep your words recognising? Oh no, that gets a bit confusing, doesn't it? Righty-ho. Okay. That makes more sense to me.
Yeah, I guess that's fine.
Right, no other changes. All right, so just see if there's anyone else. Councillor O'Neill Stevens, you indicated that something later on you felt was not quite clear enough. Did you want to adjust that? I think that was clause 5. That makes sense. Okay, happy with that. All right, thank you. All right, so no other changes, no other questions. We're now going to move into debate. Councillor
I just wanted to touch on some questions were asked by Councillor Noonan around timelines as well, and I guess this being a living document. So the intention of
Madam Mayor, just point of order. Appreciate this is a difficult one to sort of workshop through, but then answering questions of councillors as part of the recommendation, is that allowed?
What is the point of order?
Well, this being able to then disrespectfully just asking questions or answering questions throughout the day by the person who's moving.
I'm not going to uphold the point of order. It's not clear to me. Very quickly now, Councillor Fulton, and we'll move on. So just in.
I think that the bullet point list is all of the issues that have been raised by councillors over the past year in terms of what we should be turning our minds to. So we might not have it in its entirety finished by July 2022, but ideally we would have that work begun and well commenced by July 2022. So that would shape the next climate plan, and then you'd have an annual review henceforth.
Right, I'm now going to move into debate. So speaking to the motion, Councillor Fulton, do you want to speak? Do you want to wait for the right to reply? Thank you. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'm very pleased at the point we've got to today. We've given this some time and we've come back, and I think we're making real progress, because it's important when a member of this council, a councillor sitting around this table, clearly signals that they want to be heard further on an important issue like this. We need to reciprocate, and that's what we're doing today, and I'm very heartened by that. As Councillor Noonan said, she said, this document belongs to the community. And that's very important, because I'm going to pick up on that and say that we mustn't lose sight of that. And I believe that Councillor Fulton, as chair of the Environment and Climate Committee, is trying to put a human face, endeavouring to put a human face on this climate action plan with her redrafting of a lot of the interim climate plan. And she's adding things like visions and all sorts of different aspects to it that will give the community an opportunity to understand the purpose, the values, the principles, and all of that type of thing. And I think it's very, very important that we get it right from the outset, and we do appear to the community that we are inclusive, that it is their document. Councillor Sanson picked up on a good point too, that she said, well, to officers, is it operational? Well, it is, and that's why I think it needs this human touch that is coming through in the draft addendums to what is an interim action plan. So I have much pleasure in supporting it.
Councillor Courtney, Councillor Laurie, and then Councillor Sanson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Nelson City Council declaration of a climate emergency was 2 years ago. 2 years. If you have an emergency, you don't normally wait 2 years to come up with a plan to deal with that emergency. The word emergency means that you actually have to approach something with urgency. If you have an emergency, you have to approach it with urgency. 2 years waiting does not signal urgency. I acknowledge that Councillor Fulton has a lot of passion for this work and has put a lot of work and expertise into it. But I'm going to stick with the plan that we had in our agenda last week, a plan that has been supported by the Nelson Climate Forum, a plan that was given a 5-star review by Dr. Jenny Easton. I want to stick with that because I want to get our action plan out the door, acknowledging the opportunities will be there to refine the plan as it is a living document. We should adopt the plan. We should, as it stands, and we should develop a governance structure for the next stage. But I want to do that rather than support this.
So Councillor Laura, I'm just slightly confused. So this is to adopt the document that's on the agenda today and
Yep.
set up the next steps.
So I'm into that part.
So you're speaking in support or opposing adopting the action plan? Doing the
I'm
next
speaking in
thing.
support of adopting the action plan.
Next is Councillor Simpson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. So I'm wondering if we could take this in parts. I'm hoping that that might be a constructive way through to enable the adoption of the Climate Action Plan. So I'm also speaking in support of the Climate Action Plan, and I want to acknowledge the passion of Councillor Fulton and her considerable focus on ensuring that Council gets a climate action plan to the table. I'd also like to acknowledge Daniela. Someone commented to me recently that that Daniela is like Council's superpower when it comes to climate action. And, you know, quietly behind the scenes, Daniela has managed to pull all of the myriad work streams that operational work streams that Council has planned related to climate action together into a really functional and you know, easy to understand climate action plan. What we are missing is a strategic climate roadmap, and I think that it is a really critical piece of work. We do need to get on with it, you know, with urgency. But I also think we have to be really careful that we do not predetermine, that today we do not predetermine what that looks like, that we're not predetermining input from iwi or from the very considerable stakeholders out in the community that we need to liaise with. So I am speaking in support of of us adopting the Climate Action Plan today.
And I will take that as you in parts. I'll take that part and then the rest I think sits together as one. Does that make sense?
Thanks.
Councillor Brand, I think was next, and then was it Councillor O'Neill Stevens? And then Councillor McGurk.
Sorry, can you just clarify? You've just confused me with what you said just before. Are we debating the points raised in the motion put forward by Councillor Fulton and second by Councillor Courtney, or are we doing what is in the original report, which is the staff has put forward? You've just confused me before with your comment.
Where there's what is on the screen has been moved and seconded by Councillor Fulton and Councillor Courtney. At the last meeting, the recommendation, the report was not moved and seconded. So this is the motion. So that was the recommendation. It includes it does actually include what is in the report. That's clauses 1 and 2.
Okay,
So
if what Councillor Fulton and Courtney have put forward doesn't go through as is, does that mean we go back to what was in the original report?
Yes, it will, although we're going to take it in parts, is what Councillor Sanson is suggesting, so that if we take the first part and that goes through, then that I think we're probably done and dusted. Do we think? If we're taken in parts, that will be the vote. Yeah, so therefore we're taken in parts.
Okay, so,
So what's in the report is also in here. So 1 and 2.
okay, because, okay, so my debate, I'm a bit confused about what I'm actually debating now, because I appreciate the work that Councillor Fulton and the passion she has, but I sort of don't feel it's good practice to be doing this on the fly, and we keep tweaking even after people have asked their questions and fed back in, and they're still tweaking, which raises concerns for me that we aren't quite there yet, and that we may actually overlook or not see the unintended flow-on impact into something that is important because we're doing this on the fly. So for me, I sort of want to stick to, and I support a climate action plan as presented by the staff, and the timeline that was presented by the staff to follow through. So yeah, that's where I've landed.
Thank you, Councillor Brand. Councillor O'Neill Stevens.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I really want to acknowledge the huge amount of work that's gone into this by Councillor Fulton. And I absolutely support the intention around developing a broader climate plan that captures all of these elements. I see absolute benefit from having a governance oversight group dedicated to climate change and making sure that the direction set by this table is flowing through into our operational work. I do want to also really acknowledge the immense amount of work that went into this climate action plan, and thank Daniela and Nikki for their work on this. And I have coffee with Jenny quite regularly, and I've never gotten a 5 stars on anything. So for this plan to get 5 stars, it is a huge testament to your work. I am very conscious of what we've been told by staff in terms of moving forward on this, and so I'm still not sure whether we've quite landed in the right place for moving forward. And I would want to support Councillor Brand's feeling of wanting that time to discuss, and so whilst I might have had more time than others, I want to recognise that there are people at this table who aren't quite there yet on the full breadth of what's proposed. And so I wonder if the sort of pathway forward is to simply establish a governance group and come back with some more of this work, just to give time for it to really be looked through and fully considered. Because whilst this is a crisis and we need to be working quickly, and we need to be doing the hard yards, but that can't overrule the need for meaningful engagement and partnership with iwi and the community on this, because without ownership, this plan is nothing. It needs to be owned by the community, and it needs to be in partnership with mana whenua. So it's a sort of a yes, no, maybe from me. There's in spirit 100% yes, some of the practicality not quite there, but I think we can find a way forward to keep this work moving.
Well, I'm not sure how to take that as in a debate, but we'll see how we go. Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. A lot of what Councillor Hill Stevens' thoughts are probably a bit reflective of my own. Yeah, I'll speak in support of getting the action plan out to the community. It's been here too long and it needs to go out, and I really acknowledge the work of the officers to deliver the project. The resolution up there, to me, sort of, I appreciate the sentiment and the work that's gone on and the thinking, but it to me is rather prescriptive about some particular outcomes and a particular course of action that I'm not sure that we're quite there yet. Probably smacking of working in the business rather than on it. So I like the idea of some kind of governance oversight. We've got the governance around the council. We set the sort of the broad strategic direction and the goals we want to see in terms of some, climate, climate change and climate outcomes. But then there's sort of this particular piece of work that crosses all parts of the council business. We talk about viewing through a council through a climate change lens. There probably is. This is a project I think does need sort of some kind of project governance to just look after that aspect, and that acts as sort of the interface between that and the sort of the operational delivery in terms of managing that. That's straying into sort of management and actually doing the work. So I'm not sure that we're there quite yet about a governance oversight group. I'd like to see it sort of addressed in resolution 7 that's up there is about a terms of reference for a governance oversight group. I think that can be probably sufficiently broad that something can be brought back to back to this table about the scope of what's to go on, the membership, some of the outcomes we want, some of the sort of the detail that we need about project management. I think that's the resolution sufficiently broad that we can probably work with that to deliver something that comes back to this table to be signed off. I really get uncomfortable about all the other stuff there. To me, it's just too prescriptive. It looks like we're predetermined. If we're going to go out and engage with the community, they may have some views about some of those things as well. So I'd rather they were left out, so we can at least go out to the community with our climate action plan and look at other options that are out there. This will change. There'll be things that come across. So I'll just leave it at that. Comfortable that the action plan goes out. Comfortable that we look at a governance structure to manage the work going forward.
Thank you, Councillor McGurk. Any other speakers in relation to what is here today? We've Councillor Sensen.
Sorry, can we? I asked about us taking it in parts. Can we actually take it in parts? Because
I'm going to sort of test the meeting in a minute to see where you're thinking, because Councillor Rain, did I have you on the list? I'm sorry, because
Well, it's a similar question, Madam Chair, but it would appear that if we do adopt 2, i.e. adopt the climate action plan, that some of the subsequent parts of the further recommendations don't make sense.
If we adopt it.
Yeah, because there is reference to an interim climate plan under. I can't see the whole.
Yes, and so Councillor.
I mean, there's a whole lot of inconsistencies in the rest of the recommendations.
I don't want to speak on behalf of Councillor Fulton, but I think one of the issues is several elected members had. And Councillor Sensen, thank you, for quite some time has been asking for. And rightly, I'm kind of with Councillor Laurie on this. I'm going, boy, it's taking a long time to get a climate plan. We've looked at, many of us have looked at different plans around the country, like the Auckland plan, which is just fantastic, and the desire to actually have that, and that's called the climate plan. That's the climate plan. That's the big piece. That's the piece that's publicly facing. It's got the vision. It's got the Pau Māori perspective. It brings it all together, and that's the piece that. I think for many of us, we really wanted that 2 years ago. What it sounds like, it's going to take 2 years from here to get it. So that's the officer advice, that it's going to take a good period of time, from what I can see from the notes from Ms McDonald, at least 18 months to get that plan. And I guess that's the part that what Councillor Fulton's trying to do, is say that's the goal. And I had a feeling that's actually the shared view around the table, that Councillor Sensen's asked the questions around the climate action plan, and that's kind of looking at a more technical operational form. She's nodding, and so I understood that was that. That isn't an Auckland. It's not an Auckland plan at all. But it might be the building block to get to that place. So I think that's what the wording is about. Have I got that basically right, Councillor Fulton? So the climate plan is the public facing.
If you look at so the Chief Executive said that the climate action plan is delivering to resolution 3, which is on page 46 of our agenda. No, sorry, to resolution 4. So So resolution 4 reads, agrees that the work is undertaken to develop specific emission reduction projections for inclusion in the long-term plan, along with development of a comprehensive council emissions reduction action plan. So this is the climate action plan. This is that piece of work. The next pieces of work is the strategic framework, which is notes that a strategic framework to bring together and provide high-level guidance of all the key elements of climate change work will be considered through the development of the long-term plan 2021 to 2031. So that piece of work was supposed to commence in July this year. That's laid out in the strategic framework as a climate change policy, as a priority. So the rest of the resolutions are speaking to that piece of work, to setting up a governance oversight group to develop the strategic framework and work that through to next July next year. So resolution number 2 is to adopt the climate action plan, which refers to resolution 4, and then the subsequent recommendations are how we're going to deliver to the strategic framework. Now,
I think, so there's 2 parts to it, Councillor Rainey. There's the climate plan, which is the big which is the, like the Auckland plan. And then there is this, the document we've got today, which will be adopted. It'll be available. It'll be on the website. As we make different decisions, we'll update it in terms of, what we're doing. But the big one that sets out the engagement with the community around the vision principles and those matters are the next piece to come.
Well, then, Madam Chair, can somebody explain then what recommendation 5 relates to?
That's the climate plan. That's the strategic framework. So one's got the word action in it. So Auckland refers to their plan as an Auckland climate plan. They don't call it an Auckland climate action plan. So one has the word action in, one is just a plan, the climate plan.
Thank you.
So the climate plan will have the strategic framework within it.
Thank you.
So in terms of timelines, it has taken us 2 years to get a climate action plan, and the intention is in the next year we get a climate plan which incorporates the strategic framework into that, into our next iteration.
I think we'll keep going because we're in debate now. So essentially we've got the climate action plan, adopting that today, that's sitting in there to vote on at the moment, and then you've got the opportunity to set up the mechanism for getting to the next part. Now, some of you are saying to me, some of this you could support about establishing a oversight group, climate, and it needs to say climate plan governance oversight group, because we also have in front of that, thank you, Elaine, and bringing back terms of reference, but not other things. So we're going to get ourselves in a bit of a muddle here, I can see. So we're going to have to see if we can sort that out. So let's see if there's anyone else who wants to speak in the debate. I'm going to go to debate or any critical questions to be able to vote. Councillor Brand.
I'm getting, the more people speak, the more confused you're making me. So don't we have all that stuff that Councillor Fulton just talked about? And I appreciate that we're supposed to have done it in 2 years, but we've got this person starting on the 13th of December, the climate manager. Isn't that the role of what that person is going to be doing, all that stuff we just talked about? So doesn't that then progress that and then takes all that work and gets on with it? Aren't we just like trying to preempt their job? I don't know. The more you speak, the more confusing you're making that.
So I've just got to Ms McDonald just say I would think that piece of work, that the next stage will be a critical piece of work for the climate change manager and the team.
Yes.
For the team.
Through the chair, that's right. It would be the critical piece of work. And if I could just clarify on timelines, is that possible? Just to say that the resolution about an action plan you passed in August last year, so that's 2020, not 2 years ago. And the work on the strategic framework was to start in this financial year. It wasn't specified as June. The chairs were circulated documents showing it would start in 21, 22.
Okay, thank you. All right. I think we've had enough debate, councillor Skinner in the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to make it very clear, I support the adoption of the climate action plan as we've already progressed. I won't be supporting beyond that. It's concerning that we've had a recommendation earlier, which seemed very complex, seemed reasonably disrespectful to staff, disrespectful to decisions we'd already made during the year. And even when people read in the media, couldn't understand it. If we then have a new recommendation, which has now become a workshop, we have to go for every matter, then it's not a recommendation that has any real validity or quality to it. So all what I can see is the first thesis that came through, and it seemed to be like a report written by a councillor, just has undermined my confidence in the credibility of the author and the co-author to then go through an iteration which just seems to be completely different again. So I'll support the adoption of a climate plan to make clear, as is in the council report, and anything we can, being a living document, everything we can add to that, and support how that goes out consulting to public. But this, once again, workshopping this is just lost credibility.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill Stevens has emailed through an amendment.
Which I can't.
Which you can't move. That's true.
Anyone else?
Can I just call
So-
for a 2-minute adjournment?
Yes, and I need to have that discussion. So what I'm reading, I'm reading the room here, councillor Fulton, and I don't think there's going to be support for the full, for what's on this, for what you've put up today. That will be my reading of the room. I think I've got that right. I'm really trying to move this along because we're short on time. We spent a lot of time on this already. And councillor O'Neill Stevens has put forward an alternative, which indicates that he thinks there's an alternative approach. So I think we need to take an adjournment, have a quick look at that, and then see if we can make some progress today on both achieving the adoption of the climate action plan and setting up the process to get to the document that we're desperately wanting to see as the next stage. We'll take a brief adjournment. Thank you. We've resumed our meeting. We just had a few technical issues that need to get sorted out in the break. So we're back in the meeting, and I'd signaled before we went into the break that Councillor O'Neill Stevens had some words to perhaps summarise the intent around establishing a climate change governance oversight group. And he has discussed that wording with the mover and the seconder, and they are happy to substitute that as the motion. And that is now on the screen. So I'll give you a few moments to read that. And then we're going to, I think it's really quite clear what is there. I don't think we're going to need much debate because I think we've gone around that. I think the mover and seconder have listened to the mood of the council. And I'm really grateful for the support and moving through to the next stage to really get that strategic document. We want to get that done. We want to make sure that there is governance. There is governance, a governance group to support that work, because setting up visions and principles as a governance led process. So we'll just make sure we've got the screen up. Wait for first two clauses. All right. Councillor Laurie's got a question on this one.
Yeah, thanks. So I would like to know what the staff think of what they're seeing on screen, please.
I'll come up in a moment. I think, well, looking at that in the table from Ms McDonald, she was in the feedback that a terms of reference was possible either the 9th of December. Yes, it'll be tight, but I think in the interest of the fact that there is an emergency going on, we might be able to get terms of reference up by the 9th. So that was the intent to do that. You're comfortable with that, with Councillor Ms McDonald?
Yes, very comfortable with all those
Right, thank
recommendations.
All right, so that's been moved and seconded, moved by Councillor Fulton, seconded by Councillor Courtney.
Could we call a division?
Yes, we'll have a division.
We have it in parts, please.
We won't have anyone speaking again who's already spoken because I've got, in the interest of time, I really need to move on. So I'm going to speak briefly and then I'll see if Councillor Fulton wants to exercise her.
I haven't spoken
Councillor
yet.
Noonan.
And can you take it in parts, please?
And we'll take it in parts. So I'll go to you first, Councillor, and then I'll go to me and then I'll go across to Councillor Fulton to see if she wants to exercise her right of reply.
Thank you. Yes, I support 1 and 2. I think that the rest of the work should be done by all of us. I don't think that it should be, I'm not comfortable putting it through to a small party of people. I think that we should all be involved in that. So I won't be supporting the 3 or 4.
Thank you. I'm going to speak in support of what is here, and I want to acknowledge the challenge for individuals and organisations in trying to move at the pace that many of us would like. I felt Councillor Fulton was really trying to pick up the mood of this council in relation to the climate declaration and has been, very much looking to get to that end point of a document, although it is never an end point as we're acknowledging today. These are living documents, but that broader public facing document is something that I know is an objective for all of us, including the officers. We really want to get to that point. We've received a document from the Nelson Tasman Climate Forum, their climate action book, and I remember Councillor Noonan speaking, really positively about that document, saying, gosh, that's a good piece of work. And I know this council can produce something that will complement that work, and the importance of working with the Climate Forum is critical. That's why we established the Climate Forum, and I see the forum as being, really integral to bringing the cohesion for the next stages. Engagement and actually partnership with mana whenua is again something that we are taking, very, seriously, as we should as a council, and that means mana whenua being at the table from the beginning. And I know that that is a message certainly that as Mayor I'm bringing back, on a really regular basis, the pieces of work come forward. I personally would have liked to have seen mana whenua engaged in the climate action plan that we're receiving today as a critical step, because I do think it is a really important document. But we'll work with what is here, and I'm sure that through the process of developing the working through the activity management plans, we certainly had involvement there. And so certainly that those themes have been brought forward into the climate action plan that we're receiving today. But we've, it is work in progress. And I'm sure as the team, we have as we get a team, and very soon we'll have a team. There'll be some, Ms. McDonald has spoken today and really said, look, this will be a key piece of work for that team, and I'm sure that all of the reporting in terms of the terms of reference will be coming back through the Environment and Climate Committee, and so that will be regularly reported through to governance members. I'm happy for a smaller group to lead this, and actually I think that's what we need to be doing more of actually making sure that we're where we've got key pieces of work, that we task a smaller group of councillors to actually be there as the sounding board and to keep the pace and keep the drive and help with the engagement, and then bringing it back into the full framework as we do. And that's one of the reasons we established the subcommittees, to actually allow that work to happen as well. And so I see this as actually quite consistent with that kind of philosophy. So very happy to support this. Councillor Fulton, do you want to exercise right of reply? You're happy for this to be put now?
I just want to acknowledge Councillor O'Neill-Stevens for hearing the mood of the room and working hard to come up with a summary of what my intentions were. So thank you very much. I think it is a great summary, and hopefully councillors can support it. I do think that having a governance oversight group, it's a little bit like our city centre working group. We do need to move this work along, and a lot of the timing was around knowing that the climate change manager is starting on the 13th of December, which is really exciting. So as you can tell, I've been waiting quite some time to try and get the strategic framework ball rolling, and I would really encourage you to support this so that we can use our remaining year of this triennium effectively to get the next stage of this important piece of work done.
Division's been called, and we're going to take this in parts. So we will both receive the report and adopt the action plan will be step 1, and then we'll do the rest of it as step 2. Everyone's happy with that in terms of the stages? All right, so all those actually no, I'm not doing all those in favour. The Chief Executive's got the division sheets. So we're doing 1 and 2.
See the motions in front of you, numbers 1 and 2. Recommendations 1 and 2. Councillor Rainey.
Aye.
Councillor Fulton.
Aye.
Councillor Brand.
Aye.
Councillor Courtney. Aye. Councillor Bowater.
Aye.
Councillor Skinner.
Aye.
Councillor O'Neill-Stevens.
Aye.
Councillor Sanson.
Aye.
Councillor Laurie.
Aye.
Councillor Noonan.
Aye.
Councillor McGurk.
Aye.
Councillor Edgar's an apology. Madam Mayor.
Aye. It's carried. 12 votes, 1 apology. That's carried. Thank you. 4. And now we'll go to the remainder, the division on clauses 3 and 4.
Councillor Courtney. Aye. Councillor McGurk.
Aye.
Councillor Rainey.
Aye.
Councillor Edgar's an apology. Councillor Sanson.
Aye.
Councillor Bowater.
Aye.
Was that aye? Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
No.
Councillor Laurie.
Aye.
Councillor Noonan.
No.
Councillor Fulton.
Aye.
Councillor O'Neill-Stevens.
Aye.
Councillor Brand.
No.
Madam Mayor.
Aye. Thank you very much. It is carried, 9 votes in favour, 3 opposed and 1 apology. Thank you. All right, that concludes that paper and our agenda. We've had a little break, so I'm going to keep going. So hopefully, if you haven't got a cup of tea or coffee and you want one, just pop up whenever suits. We're going to move now to the paper on the report that is titled carbon credit potential from Council Indigenous Forests. It's pages 25 through 44. Now, Councillor Sanson has sent through an alternative motion, and that's now being tabled. It's not that long, so you should be able to read that reasonably quickly. It's being tabled by the governance advisors. I will invite the officers now to present the report, and I do believe we have some external, do we have external people joining us today on Zoom, Elaine? Robin will bring them in a moment. All right. So will they be able to hear us while they're in the waiting room? They will be. All right, so they're not missing out on anything at the stage. Okay, so I'll just go to the officers. So Ms. Ramirez has produced the report. So I invite you to present the report. And first question I have, are there any corrections or additions to be made to the report? And I understand the answer is yes, and that we may have a tabled document as well in relation to that. See if I can find a piece of paper. Oh, okay. Sorry, Robin, oh, we've got a table. We've got a document to be tabled. Thank you. No, that's not the alternative motion. I'm after the changes to the officers' report. So is there another document? Thank you. Oh, that's right, Robin. I'm not hurrying you. Trying to multitask. So we'll let everyone into the waiting room. So we've got people coming in now to the meeting, out of the waiting room into the meeting, and I'll just check they can hear us. Then we'll get Robin to table the changes to the report, so you've got them in front of you as Ms. Ramirez runs through them. So I'll just welcome our guests on Zoom. So we have Ollie Belton, and kia ora, Ollie. I'll just check that you can hear me. This is Mayor Rachel.
Yeah, hi Rachel. Yep, I can hear you fine. Thank you.
Oh, well, welcome, Ollie. And you're welcome if you want to turn your video on or off. So I'll leave that to you. When you're speaking, it's probably easier if you can, but you may not have a video option. I'm not sure. And welcome to Peter Gorman. Kia ora, Peter. Welcome to our meeting. I'll just check that you can hear me all right, and we can hear you.
Yes, that's fine. Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to see you. And I'll pop my video on, and that would make it a bit easier as well. All right, thank you. Thank you. So we're just tabling the amendments. So I think we're ready to go. So I'll invite Ms. Ramirez to just talk us through the changes. Kia ora, Daniela.
Kia ora. Through the chair, there are amendments. They are mainly based on the information provided in the public forum last week from Dr. Murray. And the amendments are related with the costs. So you will see that in track changes are the ETS cost, emission trading scheme cost for that size. So I'm referring these to the 27 hectares of the native forest that was, that's the area that is eligible in the emission trading scheme. So that's in letter B, you will see that the costs are approximately between 500 and 1,000 per year. And then the income, so I divided for a better understanding costs and income. So the income also, that's the new information that we can get 4 years of credits can be claimed if the area is registered in the period of 2018 and 2022. And the amount of income, the total amount of income is $41,472. So that's, I included the estimation and calculation there. So that's 27 hectares, 4 years that we can get from 2018 to 2022. 6 tons of sequestration, that's coming from the lookup table from the government, and $64 is the price of the current price of carbon credits. So in the next page, you have a summary of cost and income over the 5-year cycle. So then you will see that the first year, assuming that we could register in 2022, there will be a one-off cost for the site visit and application between $5,000 and $10,000, and then you will see the cost and for the ETS is even every year. So I try to include these two new information. So it's a lower cost than previously advised and a higher income, including those 4 years. Despite these differences, we discussed this with external consultant Oli, that is on the call, and his view remained the same, that the effort and ongoing compliance make the registration process not worth it unless the council intends to add more indigenous or exotic forests in the emission trade scheme in the future. So those are the changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. It's quite a lot to try and work through, I have to say. So can you just perhaps give us, just summarise?
Sure.
Sorry, if I could just ask first, if I could just ask a question, what I'm after is the difference between what you'd estimated the cost to what they will actually be, and also the same for the income. So just so I can get a sense of that. Thank you.
So the table of 4.10, that table will summarize better all what is written before. So the site visits and the one-off is $10,000. Yes, between $5,000 and $10,000, that's the cost. What is different is the $41,000, which is the 4 years of carbon credit. So in the income, the table, first row, $41,000. That's the difference, that it wasn't considered in the previous report.
Okay, which is roughly 4 times what was in the previous.
That's correct. So the income was $10,000, around $10,000 per year. But the new information provided included $41,000 extra.
Right, thank you. All right, any questions for Daniela in terms of what's just been tabled? First up, just in terms of the changes. So everyone, just in terms of clarity. Everyone's clear? Councillor Sensen, and then Councillor O'Neill-Stevens.
So I've got a number of questions for different people, but this is just for Daniela. Thanks for this. I'm just wondering, was the value of the exotic forestry, if it was registered and backdated, did you get an estimate of what that would be? I remember last week Dr. Murray McClintock said that that could be up to $1 million, and I just wondered if you had requested an assessment of that. Thanks.
Through the chair, the estimation that I tabled today is in the native forest, in the 27 hectares only.
So if we were to ask Ollie Belton what, back of the note, back of the envelope kind of estimate of council's exotic forestry, what the value of the potential carbon credits is for the, backdated and going forwards, he might be able to give that to us, hopefully.
Yes, I think he will. So why don't we do that now? So although I probably, Ollie, just before I come to you, I just have a little procedural, I just have some procedural questions I need to ask in relation to the report and the scope of where we're going to go. So in reading this report, I have relied on 4.10 of the report, and which says that this report's, so I've looked at what this report's about, then I've read the report, then I've relied on 4.10, which says that although CFS report also made recommendations with respect to commercial forestry, that it has done that, although outside the scope of this report, comments on these recommendations are provided below for information. Any discussion would need to take place in the forestry subcommittee, which holds the delegation for these issues and has the appropriate expertise available to answer any questions. So I just probably need to put that question to the Chief Executive. So I'm relying on that report that stands. So where are we going today with this discussion? Because it's quite clear in the report at 410, and I have relied on that. So I need to understand what we're doing in the scope of today's meeting.
So Mr. Laverdis might be able to add more clarity to this, but my understanding is that the forestry subcommittee has already done this work for the exotic forestry holdings. And I think that work was done by Peter Gorman, but Mr. Laverdis could probably clarify that for me.
Well, no, sorry, Chief Seat, I'm going to reframe my question. This is a procedural question, not a substantive question. So I'm relying on what the report is telling me that is quite clear, which says any discussion would need to take place in the forestry subcommittee, which holds the delegations for these issues and has the appropriate expertise available to answer any questions. So, I'm wanting to know what can we do today? I mean, I need your advice on that in terms of what we can do today, procedurally. Because if it's different than what's in the report, then we need to make that correction now to the report if we're going to go beyond that, what the report is telling us. I'm happy to take an adjournment if you want a moment to consider that.
Yes, that would be useful, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We'll take a brief adjournment. And Ollie, we won't be too much longer. I'm sorry to keep you on Zoom. I'll get to you as soon as I can. And you too, Peter. Thank you.
Whenever, I've got questions for the office, for the officers and for Ollie Belton.
Resuming the meeting, we're live streaming again. Just ask the councillors to sit down at the table. That would be lovely. And just go back to the Chief Executive for I had a procedural question, and then his Chief Executive is ready to respond.
So the words, and thank you for the clarification of the question, Madam Mayor. So the words outside the scope of this report refer to the fact that we were asked to, the benefits of the emissions trading scheme for commercial forestry holdings had already been investigated and reported to the forestry subcommittee. This report was to investigate the rest of our land. That's what we mean by the words out of scope. Because this report has come to the full council, then we can discuss commercial forestry aspects as well as Indigenous forestry aspects. But I would emphasise that the piece of work for exotic forestry has already been done, and Peter Gorman was the author of that work.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you, that's helpful. All right, thank you. So, Ollie, I'll come across to you, and I just ask Councillor Sanson to restate the question, and then we'll just and then we'll go to Ollie for a response.
Thank you. I've actually got a few questions for Ollie. Should I go with all
I think that would be helpful.
Okay, I'm just pulling them up. So Ollie, my question to you is that if you are considering council's land holdings as a kind of blank slate, our forests, exotic and Indigenous, would it be your recommendation that any and all eligible forests be registered in the emissions trading scheme?
Generally, my answer would be yes. To expand on that slightly, the reason being is that until you sell credits, the risk of participating in the ETS is actually very low, if not, there really isn't any. There are some costs. But if you do not join the ETS before the end of next year, then all the forests will become what we deem stranded carbon assets and will never be able to earn carbon credits again. So there is an opportunity cost. This is how I discuss it with clients, that by doing nothing, you are losing an opportunity. By participating, worst cases, you have some expenses, but no risk. And best case, you have options going forward as rules change, but also as forest management practices change.
Thanks very much. So then, if council was to do that, is it correct that backdated credits can be claimed for the exotic and the Indigenous forest for 4 or 5 years? And do you have any idea of what that amount could be? We had a fellow speak last week, Dr. Murray McClintock, who said it could be in the vicinity of $1 million backdated carbon credits. And I just wondered if you're able to give us an indication of your view on that.
Yes. So I think the report we did thought there might be about 230 hectares eligible. Of course, that's a remote assessment. And I read that previously the council had around 118 hectares registered for exotic forestry. So if we take those two figures, very general, estimate, I come up with right now, at the end of this year, the council would be sitting on approximately $1.8 million worth of carbon credits if that larger area of 230 hectares of exotic was registered. And so you could basically half that. And so I think Dr. McClintock is correct in his estimate. I think it's probably around between 900,000 and $1.8 million worth of carbon credits that the exotic forestry would be sitting on by the end of this year.
And then is this the work to register, to assess and register this forest, the exotic and the Indigenous, or all eligible land into the emissions trading scheme? Is this the kind of work that your team does? And is there capacity for that kind of work to be done to meet the 2022 deadline?
Yes, we do, but the question of capacity is interesting. The industry is that, demand is outstripping supply for these sorts of services, given that tight deadline. So the answer is, at the moment, there's a lot of pressure, but we believe that more capacity will free up in the next 3 to 4 months. I mean, we're hiring more staff. We know our colleagues out there and other companies are hiring more staff. And the waiting time at the moment to get a registration through is 6 months. So really, an application would really need to be in no later, I would really think no later than March, April next year to achieve that deadline.
And then I've got one more question. Would it require staff time from council to be able to do this, or could it be completed independently of council staff?
It can be independent. It would be helpful to have input from council staff or their advisors. I would say actually PF Olsen's and maybe Peter Gorman would have all the information required at their fingertips that for a submission. But most of it, other than forest stand information, is based on recent aerial and satellite imagery and historic satellite imagery.
Okay, thanks very much. So I'm just signaling that I would like to move an alternative
I'll
motion.
second that.
Thanks.
It's the one that we've got tabled. Thank you. That's good. Thank you very much. What I might do is Peter's here. Peter, I just might come across to you, given you have looked at this matter before, and just to see if there's any information that we need to have in front of us in considering this today. And I just also need to check that has the alternative motion been sent to you, so you know what it is that's now on the table? Has that been sent to you prior to today's meeting? Just get you to unmute, Peter, and then we'll be...
Through the chair. No, I haven't been sent the alternative motions. I don't have that in front of me.
Okay, if somebody could get that across to Peter, that would be useful. Thank you. So Peter, just following on from the questions and the responses in relation to the commercial forestry, I'm conscious that you have had experience with this. So is there anything that you wish to add to that conversation that we should take into consideration?
Yes, well, I could say that the council had registered its post-89 exotic forests in the ETS back in 2012. And there was 118 hectares were accepted as being eligible at that time after the scrutiny that MPI puts on these things. I think that is about the area that we're talking about of forest that would be acceptable. In 2016, just to go back over the history, we agreed to deregister that land because there wasn't, we didn't consider there's much value in staying in because the stands involved are roughly around the same age, so that when they're harvested, then you'd have to pay back virtually all the units that would be issued. So there wasn't be any financial benefit in doing that. The alternative that Dr. Murray McClintock had been brought up last week was to register the forest, and you can earn all these units for sure. But he was talking about keeping the pine plantations as a permanent forest where you wouldn't harvest. So you wouldn't have any harvesting liabilities, so you wouldn't have to pay units back. And that is technically true, but there are other physical and biological reasons why it wouldn't be a good idea to use those pine plantations as forests, because they're not the right sort of forest to have as a permanent forest. That's an unproven concept. There'd be a very high risk of wind flow and damage, which would cause downstream problems with if there were floods being washed down waterways. If you want to have a permanent forest, the best forest type for that would be indigenous forest, I believe, or some other mixture of species that will be resilient in the long term to climatic extremes. So,
thank you, Peter. I think it might be worth just going back again, just to establish, just again for the elected members, because this is fresh to the table today, that the rationale for deregistering 2016. If you could just go over that again, I just want to make sure that everyone follows that step, and then we'll just go back to and then I'll come back again maybe with one more question.
Well, the reason was because if you register now, these forests, you're on what would be called the stock change accounting method, where you earn units as the forest continues to grow, but when it's harvested, there's loss in carbon, so you pay the units back, and there's only a small gain in units that you get if you continue to replant the land, and for a small area of 115, 118 hectares, there's not much financial benefit in doing it. That was the rationale.
All right, thank you. So it wasn't much financial benefit. Was there any risk concern about a significant financial loss, or was it just that there wasn't much financial benefit at that point?
No, no risk of a loss, but there would be the actual financial gain was large enough to warrant the ongoing participation in the ETS and administration costs and oversight by council, etc.
All right, thank you, Peter. Let's open for some questions for both. We'll try and get all of the questions for Peter and Ollie now, so that they don't have to spend all day sitting on Zoom with us. I'll go back to Councillor Sanson, and I'm going to Councillor Noonan.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, through the chair. Kia ora, Peter, and possibly Ollie. I'm just wanting to check that Peter and maybe Ollie are aware that there is another work stream underway that is looking at the potential options for managing this land differently and the possibility of transitioning council's exotic forestry to permanent forests. And so whilst there is no decision on that yet, and we don't know what the outcome of that possible review might be, it is a possibility. So is it correct that if we were to be looking at transitioning to permanent forests, it would still make sense to register all eligible owned and managed land into the emissions trading scheme so that we have the potential of financial return from this land in the future as permanent forests?
Yes, through the chair, that would be true if you were to transition the post-89 eligible land, which was still about 118 hectares, into permanent forestry with an indigenous forest. Yes, then it would be you would be a very sensible thing to register that land into the ETS, because you would get a stream of units coming in and you wouldn't have any liabilities for harvest, because there wouldn't be any harvest. I should also say that you don't have to do that immediately, because if you want to register it as permanent forest, you can do that anytime after 2022, because the permanent forest option doesn't force on January 2023. You don't have the same urgency for permanent forest.
So Peter, could you just repeat that? I think the connection's good, but we just missed a couple of words here. So in terms of the leaving it for permanent forest, permanent indigenous, if you're going to move into that space, you're saying there isn't this timeline isn't as critical, so that you've got time to do that any time
yeah,
after that?
That's exactly right. In fact, you can't register it as permanent forest until after 1 January 2023, when those provisions come into force under the Climate Change Response Act.
All right, okay.
Can I add something to that?
Thanks, Ollie.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so I agree with what Peter's saying. I would just caveat with that there isn't an urgency for permanence, but for the fact you lose 5 years worth of carbon, which right now at 4 years is worth potentially between almost 1 million and 2 million, depending on the numbers. It's quite complex, the carbon accounting. So it also, the value of that opportunity depends a lot on what that management and transition from pine to natives looks like. So if it's a clear fell of the pine and then replanting or reversion of natives, then I think what Peter's saying is very true. However, if it's a slow transition over 200-300 years of taking out forest and slowly putting in natives, then that looks quite different. And I guess I just go back to what I said earlier, which is what being in the ETS is just more about preserving potential future opportunities. And so that gives you the most opportunity to then sort of choose which pathway forward at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Ollie. Look, Peter, I'm not trying to do a testing of experts, but I'm kind of needing to. So would you agree with that view, that it gives you the most choice doing that?
Well, it does. It gives you the choice of an option of gradual transition to Indigenous forests over a long term. I'm talking the century scale. But I'm not personally in favour of that option because I don't believe it's an unproven concept, and there's risk of wind throw of the pines during the transition phase, which could have negative environmental impact.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll go to Councillor Noonan for questions.
Thank you. I'm just trying to get a sense of where we are now with our forests and what we're planning, and the impact of potentially signing up to the ETS or not, and how that looks financially, whether we would have some dip years and then if we transition into some other species. So Peter, you've probably got the plan. You probably know what we're doing better than I can remember. So can you help me out there, please?
Well, if I understand the question right, it depends on the management strategy, as Ollie mentioned, that if it's clear fell the pine and regenerate it to native, there would be no net carbon income for quite a number of years, because you would have to, the counting does get complicated, but you have to account for the decay of the residues from after harvest, which goes on for 10 years, and the regrowth from the Indigenous forest is slow and doesn't contribute much, so there wouldn't be much benefit for maybe 10 years. If your strategy was to not harvest the pine forests and let them transition over a long scale, then there would be positive income, and quite substantial income for a long time. But again, you have the longer term risk to the council of wind flow of the forest, and then what happens when the forest reaches carbon equilibrium. There's no further income, but there's still ongoing costs.
I guess I want to know what our plan actually is at the moment. I think we've had some plans to fell pine and plant in other species, but overall, what is the council's plan at the moment?
I might go, Peter, to Mr. Laverdis, because we have got a resolution from the long-term plan to do some work, and I think that's the piece of work that we need to reflect today, that there is not a static position in relation to council's commercial forestry. There is a stream of work. So if I can just go to Mr. Laverdis to talk to that piece of work and what he's proposing.
So through the chair, yes, you are correct. At the moment, we are still continuing to harvest our commercial forestry and replanting pine. There's a resolution that still favours pine as the commercial. We have are retiring approximately 25% of our blocks, and those are progressively being replanted in alternate species. As the Mayor correctly indicated, there was a resolution on a council resolution that we do some additional work, and I am preparing a report for the forestry subcommittee for December as that will recommend a proposal to move that recommendation forward, and that incorporates a number of streams of work.
Do you have that in front of you, Mr. Levutis, just in terms of the streams of work?
And through the chair, no, but I can call up my report if
right, if
give
it's
me a
needed.
couple of
All right,
seconds.
just in case there's questions on that. Would you like to know what they are, Councillor?
That would be helpful, but I also would quite like to know, Madam Mayor, if we're looking at this alternate, what actually it will mean in the over time, whether we're going to be in a deficit to start with and then a credit later, or just how it impacts the financials.
I think that's not a question that the officers will be able to answer today, because it'll depend on what we do with the commercial forest estate, and that's up for review through the plan processes. So until we've made those decisions, we won't know. I think that's the issue.
So it makes it difficult to make a decision on on this proposal.
Okay, I'll go to Mr. Levutis because I think he's got the strands of work.
So through the chair, I agree with you. I wouldn't be able to answer Councillor Noonan's question. That's we need to do some more work on that. But what I am proposing to give effect to the council resolution, and just as a reminder, the council resolved on the 24th of June that they be given a report on the potential cost, scope and high-level implications, including financial, of undertaking independent review of council's approach to forestry in 21-22, including considering developing a regenerative forestry plan prioritising Indigenous forestry opportunities.
Could you slow down and read that slowly, please? The fastest reading I've ever heard.
Sorry. That the council requests a report on the potential costs, scope and high-level implications, including financial, of undertaking an independent review of council's approach to forestry in the 21-22 financial year, including considering developing a regenerative forestry plan, prioritising Indigenous forestry opportunities, climate leadership and innovation to inform the forestry activity management plan and treasury management policy. So that was the council resolution that was passed on the 24th of June.
Thank you. And that piece of work will be coming to the Forestry Advisory Group in December. How that's going to be transacted. And
that's correct, on the 1st of December.
All right, I'll go on to Councillor Brand and then Councillor Fulton.
Thank you, through the chair. I just want to clarify. Are we talking about all council forestry or just the fragmented 27 hectares?
What's on the screen, we're talking about, and what's been proposed, it's been moved and seconded by Councillor Sensel and Councillor O'Neill-Stevens, is that we agree to undertake a detailed assessment of all council land under ownership and management, so all the land we own, for eligibility in the emissions trading scheme, ETS, and request that eligible council-owned and managed land, including exotic forestry, be registered into the emissions trading scheme before 1 April 2022. So step one is the assessment to find out what is eligible, and step two is the registering of all land.
So that's that piece of work that Mr. Levutis
No,
that's a
that's not.
separate piece.
No.
Okay. And then my other question is, we talked about registering, but then we talked about history we deregistered. Is there a cost to deregistering?
Question. So is there a cost to deregistering if you decide not to? Who'd like to answer that one? Peter? Ollie, thank you. Someone.
Look, no, I mean, there is a cost, but it's pretty minor. So I think MPI charge $102, including GST. And so then it would just be the consultants' fees, which I'm sure are very reasonable. No, like it's de minimis in the scheme of things. Maybe a couple of $1,000 max.
Thank you.
Okay, so just to clarify, if we were to register, claim the credits over that period of time that's already happened, then if we realise that it's not beneficial and there's no real cost benefit as what happened in 2016, we can just deregister again and not be penalised heavily. Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm seeing nodding. I think it's correct.
That's correct.
De minimis cost.
That's correct. I just should point out as well, just because I know that you've seen costs around the native forestry, there are additional costs if you go over 100 hectares in area, which is for measurement. So your ongoing costs would also include a measurement every 5 years, which based on the size of this forest, I'd estimate at about $12,000 every 5 years.
Right, thank you. Peter, anything you need to add, or you happy with that summary?
Yes, that's all correct.
Great, that's great. All right, just make sure we're on the same page here. Okay, I think we've pretty much got what we need in terms of the background. So we've got that in terms of the ETS. So I don't think there's any further questions. Haven't got Councillor Fulton here, so I'm not sure what her questions were. And I just need to, so I don't think that's the end of no further questions for Ollie or Peter, so you're welcome to stay, but I'm just in case you need to get away. I think we're all done with questions for you. Now, I guess just in terms of what's on the screen, I'll need to get some officer advice. So it's the first question I have is for Ms. Ramirez, just on basis of the information that you've heard today. Now you've heard the information from Mr. Belton and Mr. Gorman. Are there any changes that you would propose to your report?
No, not changes in my report.
Okay, thank you. So your recommendation would still be that we don't register. Is that correct?
The recommendation of the report was only in the native forest. And because it's such a small amount of land, it's 27 hectares. And the possibility is that when we do the detailed assessment, it can be smaller than that. It's a bit uncertain. It would be up to the councillors to decide if we want to invest further and take the risk that the 27 hectares are fully eligible.
All right, but if the commercial forest was in there as well, what would your view be then?
Yes, I would suggest that it would be good to register.
Thank you. All right, so Councillor, now, officers, I just need to know in terms of what's on the screen, is there any advice around that? I've got a note here saying possibly suggesting predetermination in that second clause. So who wants to answer that one? Might need a bit of rewording.
So I'll answer that, Madam Mayor. So no problem with number 2. I mean, that detailed assessment ties in with the work that Mr. Olivertis read out. But 3, in my view, and listening to the consultant, suggests that we have predetermined what the results of some of that work would be, and would need to understand more of the consequences before number 3 should be considered.
Okay, so there would have to be some rewording. In other words, subject to would have to be there have to be a report back on eligibility and then a decision made on registering, essentially. Is that the step? Okay.
Would it be, given that we've got a report from the expert Ollie Belton in front of us today that recommends we do this, is it predetermination, or is it that we are taking advice from an expert who had been engaged by council to do this assessment?
I also had a report from Peter Gorman that said don't. So,
except that none of us have seen that report. I don't think it exists.
Oh, go to Mr.
Sorry, Mr. Levertis, Councillor Sanson was suggesting that Peter Gorman's report
Well, we haven't seen it.
doesn't exist.
I did ask if we could see it.
The report where the 2016 report.
No, it references in this document, it references that a report was done for the forestry subcommittee in May 2020, but I haven't been able to find that report.
So through the chair, that was a briefing that we had with the forestry subcommittee, and Councillor Sanson was at that briefing. That was a specific briefing that we had on the ETS as a request from Councillor Sanson and the team, Peter, Land Vision, and PF Olsen presented that, and Mr. Chris Cameron was in attendance at that meeting from memory.
So is there a report?
There was a presentation. Yes, and
Right.
Councillor Sanson would, from memory, have a copy of that, but of that presentation.
So sorry, Peter, because you're still there. So Peter, I presume you produced some advice for the officers that sits behind that presentation. Is that right? We're just discussing the ETS assessment.
Through the chair, the first report was in 2016, and it was included in the report by the Catalyst Group. And then subsequently, I think the one you're referring to was a quick exercise done by PF Olsen that confirmed the recommendation in the Catalyst report.
Oh, okay. So that's the May 2020. So that was a PF Olsen piece of work, not a. We're talking about.
That's my understanding of it. Yes.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you, Councillor Sanson. Can you just help me with the paragraph number, or just the reference in the report, the page number that you were referring to? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just pull up my questions. It says page 29, 4.12.2, separate analysis undertaken by PF Olsen. And the questions I sent through was, how was this presented to council? Could this report please be supplied to elected members? Yeah.
All right, so that's yes. So that's yes. No, that's very clear in the report that it was PF Olsen. All right, so that's fine. I just was a bit confused about the names of who we're talking to. All right, any other questions at this stage? I had Councillor Fulton on the list, and then I'll go to Councillor Brand. I've been to you, Councillor Brand, haven't I? Or are you still waiting? No, and then Councillor Neil Stevens. Then I'd like to get on with making a decision, please, Council.
Yes, I have a question, and apologies, I had to step out of the room, so apologies if this question's already been asked and answered. In terms of our climate change emergency and our response, I guess we could call it our strategic response to climate change and our narrative around how we move forward and strive to reach our zero carbon goals. Sequestering carbon through our forests is a really good way of doing that. Does being registered with the ETS allow us to measure that and therefore offset our emissions against, say, our landfill methane gas? So is it beyond the financial yield, is it a meaningful way to show how we are sequestering carbon?
Thank you, Daniela.
Through the chair, for a carbon footprint inventory, we don't have to register through the ETS to consider the carbon sequestration. We can measure the carbon sequestration from our forest and include that in the carbon accountancy. And that's, I think, in the report, that's one of the options. Sorry, in the conclusion, the next step is council will be estimating carbon sequestration figures as a removal in future council communities and carbon footprint inventory. So if that's the purpose, if just offsetting, we don't have to register to ETS.
And so what page is that? Can you show me?
It's 30. Next step, 7.1.
7.1. Okay, on page 30.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Councillor Estimate. Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
All right, Councillor Neil Stevens.
Kia ora, yeah. Just around that question of predetermination, Pat. Thought you could get away. So with clause 3, your advice is that could constitute predetermination. Why would not registering it not constitute predetermination?
So it seems to me we're doing two big pieces of work at the moment. One about that Alec read out the scope, and then if 2 gets passed, a detailed assessment of all the land that's eligible in the emissions trading scheme. But it seems that number 3 goes past both of those and says, doesn't matter what comes out of those 2 reports, register it in the emissions trading scheme now. That's what I mean by predetermination.
So would your advice be that the report we've got in front of us today doesn't meet the decision-making requirements of the LGA in terms of information?
No, not in my view. There was a detailed study done of our non-commercial forestry, and then a passing comment about our commercial forestry. And what does concern me is I'm getting conflicting advice from 2 respected experts, and we need to understand that. And whoever does this piece of work regarding the emissions trading scheme, we're probably going to have to look at an author and a peer reviewer, and come back with some definitive statements.
Okay.
Can I just test that? I'm not sure I have got conflicting advice. I just want to test that because I think this, as I understand it, the intent of taking this step is around opportunity that may or may not be realised. And what I'm hearing is that there is certainly some greater analysis that would have to be done to determine how you would manage the commercial forestry box. And there are potentially some quite large costs associated with the ongoing management if you were to retain the stands. There'd have to be a real consideration to the management technique that was going to be used. But what I understood is that this step, if we were to then withdraw, decide actually the management costs were too high, that the cost of withdrawal would be de minimis. That's what I've understood. And if I've got that wrong, Peter and Ollie, please just pop on your unmute and let me know.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think I'd agree that there isn't a conflict here. I'm not taking a position on what the best way forward is in terms of management of the forest. If council decided today that they were going to clear fell all the forest within the next few years, I would agree with Peter's suggestion that it shouldn't be in the ETS because, with the added caveat that it was going to then regenerate into natives or be planted in natives, because you wouldn't be prejudiced by not joining the ETS now. You could join later in a permanent scheme. I guess what I was pointing out is that, and you've just summed it up, is there's an opportunity that will be lost if different pathways are chosen. And by preserving that opportunity now, you can always deregister later or choose that pathway around permanence and Indigenous reversion. But if you don't get into the ETS, you forego those 5 years worth of credits and there's a potential opportunity cost. Look, I don't want to overstate it, but Peter will be aware of this. Being in the ETS also presents opportunities which are quite stupid, to be honest, but it's to do with government regulation. Right now, parties are getting out of the ETS and paying back at a lower cost when they're harvesting than what their units are worth. So we've got clients right now who are harvesting their forests, paying back the government at an average price of $28 a unit, and they have got the units in their bank worth 65, and people are making millions of dollars. Now, it's not great for the climate, but that is a policy failure, and it's happened about at least twice, if not 3 times with the ETS. My point being is if you're in the scheme, you can have those opportunities, whether it's future management or playing the rules.
Thank you. And Peter, anything else to add, or do you think we've got that sufficiently covered in terms of the first step?
I think the only point of disagreement is whether permanent forestry with pine plantations in that location is a viable option.
Yeah, that's what I understood to be. So, yeah.
I've already discounted that one, Ollie.
Okay.
I don't make a comment on that, by the way. I just want to make it clear.
No.
I'm just looking from an ETS perspective,
No,
not
it's
on
fine.
a forest management perspective.
All right. So I think I'm really clear on that. So the issue will be, for me, is it will involve officer time to do this. So my question is really to Chief Executive is to, you've been aware of this proposed motion since last week. So have you turned your mind to actually if it was to go through today, what sort of, what impact would be on the staff work program?
There'll be some impact. We've got to commission the work, but really a lot of this work sits outside the expertise of our staff. So no, there will be some workload, some cost associated with two, but nothing insurmountable.
Right. So in that case, I'm going to come back to the do we need to reword clause 3? Is there any need to reword clause 3? I mean, I do want to make sure the Chief Executive's happy as happy as you can be with the wording. So if you think there need to be some changes, we should do those now.
Oh, look, Madam Mayor, I'm frequently told that I'm too risk averse, so I've given my advice. So if the council want to go for it, that's absolutely your call.
Thanks, Pat.
Well, I think it's mere that if you feel there is some better wording that we should use, then I'd want to have that today. So I'm happy to take a little moment to pause to see if you think there'll be some better wording. It will still achieve the outcome, but will make you feel more comfortable.
So the difficulty is, I think Ollie say that really we'd have to get our application in by 1st of March. And I don't think I'm not sure that we can do two by 1st of March. So, this is not a subject of expertise for me, but I need to understand the replanting costs. If we withdraw from the scheme, do we have to repay any money we've been paid? And how we slowly re-establish to convert from pine to native without getting wind throw on those incredibly steep slopes that a lot of our trees are planted on. Those are challenges that I don't have the answers to, and I thought that I might get an answer for those under 2. So I don't think that we can achieve 2 and 3 in the time frame that Ollie is talking about. But particularly as that given that there are some differences of opinion about the reinstatement process, that I would need some irrefutable advice on that.
All right, go to Councillor Neil Stevens.
Sorry, yeah, just another clarification. I feel like we're getting back into the forestry management versus ETS. So the decision in front of us directly relates to the ETS, which, just to clarify, Ollie, was your advice that is a decision that you think we should take unless we're planning to clear foul all of that forestry and replant it into natives within the next 3 years? So
it's yes. Okay.
Question for Mr. Laverdis, maybe. Are we planning on doing that? Are we planning on cutting down all of our pine trees and planting natives in the next 3 years?
And through the chair, certainly not in the next 3 years, because forestry, we harvest and we replant, and we harvest and we replant. So, those have 20, 30-year cycles. So certainly not in the next 3 years. There are to give effect to the 2016 council resolution, there are blocks that we will harvest and replant, and that is already underway. But there's a lot of work to do. Certainly not in the next 3 years. No.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think we've been on this for long enough. We're now going to move into debate. So I'm going to open for debate. Councillor Central, would you like to speak or reserve your right of reply?
I'd like to reserve right of reply and also just asking if we could take a division on this. Thanks so
Absolutely.
much.
All right, speaking to the motion, Councillor Neil Stevens.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm very happy to. I'll just hold up. No, please.
No, sorry, I apologize because I have no idea what I'm being asked. So it's Councillor Bywater, did you have a question?
I was just going to ask if we could take this in parts.
I'll take it in parts.
Understanding orders, you have to.
I have to. Yes, I do understand it was Councillor Stevens. I was just looking at it to see whether it would cause any problems where I could give some guidance and influence. Sorry, I missed it.
I'm fun at parties.
Oh, you're fun at parties. Oh God. Yes. Sometimes it feels like I'm not sure what it feels like in this room sometimes. I'm not sure party is quite the word. Right, okay, where we go in debate.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, I think that the decision in front of us is fairly clear cut. We've heard from accidental puns, I'm sure that'll be a theme. We've heard from Ollie that we're talking about $900,000 to $1.8 million worth of carbon assets that we would potentially lose if we don't register before the end of next year. We know that in terms of registering, they take a first in, first served approach. If we dawdle on this decision, there is a good chance that we will miss that deadline, and that is $900,000 to $1.8 million worth of potential financial gain for this council and for the ratepayers of Nelson that we would be willfully throwing out the window. With the knowledge that the costs for registering are comparatively very low, and that the risks with our current approach to forestry that is very low, that our forestry management would impact significantly on this approach. We also heard from Dr. Murray McClintock, who I think last week made very clear the breadth of his expertise and knowledge, who was supporting this action as well. There is a huge gap between the realised or potential financial risk versus the potential financial gain, and it is heavily weighted towards financial gain. And if surely our forestry harvesting profits should be able to account for that small financial risk. And if they can't, we probably shouldn't be in pine forestry in the first place if we can't account for, $15,000 worth of registering costs. So this motion is fundamentally a common sense approach, and crucially, it needs to be made now if we want to realise the benefit. So I want to just finish up by thanking Councillor Sanson for her continued advocacy for this point, and encourage everyone around the table for the sake of the climate, for the sake of our own financials, and for the sake of protecting that future opportunity to please support this motion.
Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, because we've moved into the commercial forestry side, I wasn't expecting that. At 4.10, I was relying on not having that part of the business discussed. And there is information that I don't have that I feel unable to actually make the decision today. So I thought I'd better make that clear. I have requested some information. It's not available today. That impacts my decision. I'm quite happy to receive the report, but I'm not prepared to go any further.
Other speakers, Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm speaking in favour. Dr. Murray McClintock said last week that basically we've been managing forests in Aotearoa, New Zealand, the same way for the last 170 years. And it seems to me that there are smarter and more sustainable ways of doing things. And what Councillor Sanson is putting up today is an opportunity for us to do things in a smarter and more sustainable way. And I think as modern council, we should go for it. I haven't heard anything today that makes me think that taking these steps isn't the right thing to do. I think it's worth noting that this isn't just environmentally responsible or responsible in terms of climate change, it's also financially responsible. And I'd really encourage other councillors to support what is on the screen.
I'm going to speak in support of what is here today. I have, think in light of the review that we've got in the long-term plan, it would be the opportunity cost here of not taking the step and just reserving our position would be not the right step to take. There's a de minimis cost if we decide to pull out, but given the direction of council through the long-term plan to do the review, this feels to me like a sensible and complementary step with very little downside risk if we were to decide to withdraw. So there's some steps to go through here. I really want to thank Mr. Belton and Mr. Gorman who've taken the time to come and work through this today, and I absolutely respect the advice of Mr. Gorman around the future management. And so I'll have to say I think there will be some challenges to realising this opportunity, but to close it off, I think would be for me the wrong decision today. I think we need to leave that opportunity available to be considered. I also, take on board the advice from the officer who has said she would support a change if we were to look at the whole land area, and that would be the right step. So on the basis that the officer's advice is to do that, the report writer, then I think that we need to follow that advice and leave that opportunity there. I'm very conscious of the fact that this is another piece of work that your team, hasn't got timetabled. It will really depend on consultants carrying the heavy load here and being able to get on and get this piece of work done. But I think there's been a good case made for keeping the door open, and I'm really happy to support this. Any other speakers? I'll go to right a reply. Councillor Sense. Councillor Bowater, and then Councillor Fulton. We're very short on time, so we'll keep it nice and tight for everyone.
Thank you. I could support 1 and 2, but I'd just like to make it plain that for me, I'm struggling with number 3. I don't think it's worded in such a way that I can support it, and hence the reason I've asked for them to be taken separately. And I could explain, but I'll just leave it there.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you. Councillor Fulton.
I'm going to speak in support of 1, 2 and 3. I've always found the emissions trading scheme somewhat confusing, and today it was helpful. It was really helpful. I think a workshop on this would have been even more helpful. I really look forward to hearing some more about it, but I do think that we have an opportunity here, and that this should be part of our climate change response. So I appreciate that Daniela had planned on measuring the carbon sequestration anyway, but I do think that this is an important part of showing of walking the talk and showing the community that we are doing everything we can to participate in climate change responses. So I'll be supporting it too.
Thank you. Councillor Sensel for the right to reply.
Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor. Debate.
I think I've had enough. Have I had enough on the debate to keep going? Or do I need another one? I've had enough. Okay.
I'm happy for Councillor Skinner to have the opportunity to speak.
Fine, thank you. I had called the right to reply, but the mover has made space for you to speak.
Thank you. Appreciate that, because I think we haven't had a range of views as such. I'm always supportive of what we do with looking after our mature forests, and on the parks and reserves, and as staff mentioned, we're already retiring 25% of our blocks, and that's work that's just been quietly going on by staff and the support of committees and councils. You can see up the Brook area where it's more desirable to remove the exotic. We've done that and just got on with it. So I'm more of a person about practicalities, and I think there's a little bit of confusion at the debate in regards to it. So supporting climate by investing in carbon credits. I'm a little bit cynical of a carbon credit system. I mean, I've put a few dollars in it to see how it floats in the share market. But as far as improving the planet and the environment, I'm a big believer in protecting the forests we've got and being very careful about how we plant or don't plant. But so with this in regards to our reserves, etc., I know in last term we had a look at that and it didn't add up. I was hoping it would, it didn't add up. And once again, we've got some advice on that, on the amount we've got there. So my concern is with carbon credits and us putting into forests that already exist. I'd rather just let those forests do what they do best and sucking in the carbon and pumping out the oxygen. And as we've done the forests on our landscape and forests and areas of land, we would decide to change the use or retire by all means. But my concern is when the carbon credits were sort of falsely justifying more resource use because we just justify it by the trees that we've already got growing. I see when we've had speakers on behalf and consultants in the past, not present, but in the past have left, who've sort of justified flying in the aircraft or so forth because, we've got some trees that we've planted already growing. They're going to do that whether you fly or not. So I understand what we're trying to achieve there, but I cannot support this from the advice that we've had and taking into account the advice we've already taken. By all means, if we decide to change the land use, there's an opportunity, we can do that as far as accessing carbon credits or investing in them.
Thank you. Right, a reply, Councillor Sanson.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, through the chair. So first of all, I'd just really like to say thanks to the council staff for bringing this report up, for the council advice, or for the staff advice, for the advice from our experts, and for the support around the table in getting this here. In the 1940s, council said to the community, we're going to make money for the community off public reserve land with exotic forestry. 80 years later, there has still been no dividend paid out to benefit the community. Based on the projections contained in the 2021 to 31 Forestry Activity Management Plan and the Forestry Reserve Balance in the 2021 to 2031 Long-Term Plan, no net profit for this 10-year period is projected. In fact, managing the forest for timber only is projected to make a loss on the forestry reserve. So the community is paying for a forest.
Point of order, is that accurate when we've been through this before regards to profits or growth or loss? My understanding, we've made growth from it. Whether that's right or wrong is another thing, but we've been through this before where misinformation. I'd like to have an opportunity for the CEO to respond.
I'm happy to refer to the Forestry Reserve page in the long-term plan.
I just need to go to get some advice from the Chief Financial Officer. If you need it.
So through the chair, I just need to double check those numbers.
Okay, thank you. Oh, it's all right. Okay, I think Ms. Harrison, ready to help me out with the point of order?
So through the chair, the numbers quoted within that exact 10 years that is in the long-term plan by Councillor Sanson are correct. But as has been pointed out many times, looking at a distinct 10-year period on forestry activity that lasts 30 years can produce any result you'd like it to.
All right, so
So I've been very careful about my wording.
Okay, so you're not trying to suggest that the forestry doesn't return a dividend to Nelson City Council?
Well, it has not yet paid a dividend out of the forestry reserve.
Is that correct?
So through the chair, we have historically accounted for it as a closed activity, so there is no dividend paid out to general ratepayers.
Well, I'm not going to uphold the point of order. Councillor Skinner.
No profit over those 30 years, 40 years.
Yeah, but if council produces documents that Councillor Sanson is accurately quoting, then it's not a point of order.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. So hopefully I can continue because I've been very careful with my wordings. I'm not trying to upset anybody. So in the last 80 years and for the next 10 years, it will be 90 years, the community is paying for a forestry operation that it's been gaining little financial benefit from. Here is a no-risk opportunity or a very low-risk opportunity to turn that around. It is our obligation as elected representatives to make decisions that are financially prudent and responsible for our community for today and for the future. This is not an insignificant decision. Not registering all eligible land into the emissions trading scheme is a lost opportunity, a loss to the community of potentially millions of dollars. Because of the 2022 deadline, this is not a decision to delay. This is a decision we need to make today. And this is a decision that preserves and amplifies our opportunities now and for future generations. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, division's been called for. So we're going to first receive the report, then we'll do 2, and then we'll do 3.
So you want to do a division for number 1?
Well, division's been called, so I don't have any option unless someone just tells me they're happy to not have the division on 1. Who called the division?
I called the division with 1 and 2 together at 3 separate.
No, but who called for the division in the first place? No? Oh, Councillor O'Neill Stevens.
No, I called for the division, but somebody called for it to be taken in parts.
Oh,
so
right.
I would like a division for sure on all of the votes,
Right,
but somebody.
I called for parts.
So can we receive the report and do?
Yes, let's do that without a division.
Can we just receive the report first? Okay. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much for that. And now we'll do 2 and then we'll do 3.
So we're now looking at number 2 on its own. Councillor Noonan.
Aye.
Councillor McGurk.
Aye.
Councillor O'Neill Stevens.
Aye.
Councillor Sanson.
Aye.
Councillor Eck is an apology. Councillor Laurie.
Aye.
Councillor Brand.
Aye.
Councillor Bowater.
Aye.
Councillor Courtney.
Aye.
Councillor Fulton.
Aye.
Councillor Rainey.
Aye.
Councillor Skinner.
No.
Madam Mayor.
Aye. That one is carried unanimously. Oh, no, it's not. Sorry. It's 11 in favour and 1 against, but carried. Okay, 1 apology. Right, now we're doing 3.
Councillor Skinner.
No.
Councillor Sanson.
Yes, aye.
Councillor Rainey.
Aye.
Councillor O'Neill Stevens.
Aye.
Councillor Noonan.
No.
Councillor McGurk.
Aye.
Councillor Laurie.
Aye.
Councillor Fulton.
Aye.
Councillor Edgar. There's an apology. Sorry. I would have spotted it. Councillor Courtney.
Aye.
Councillor Brand.
Aye.
Councillor Bowater.
No.
Madam Mayor.
Aye. The vote is carried. 9 votes in favour, 3 opposed and 1 apology. All right. We'll move on to hopefully the last item. Is it the last item of this agenda? And then we've got another meeting to have after that. And we'll have some discussion about whether we'll have a break or not after we do this one. All right, so we're now into the last item in the resumed council meeting. What's that topic? Oh, I think it's just a recommendation from committee, isn't it? That's all we've got, pages 75 through 88 of the agenda. And welcome Maxine to the meeting. Kia ora, Maxine. We'll take your report as read. Are there any corrections or additions that need to be made to the report?
No, nothing further to the report. Perhaps just one update relating to decision from Tasman District Council in relation to their environment plan that I thought would be worthwhile conveying to you. They met earlier this month to also consider their program in relation to the full review of their environment plan. And they have resolved to carry on with the work to get to a position of understanding their issues and options, and then are going to pause later next year to review where the legislation is at and whether or not they will continue on. So they're also keeping in mind the evolving nature of the legislation.
Maxine, any questions? Councillor McGurk? You're happy to move?
I'm happy to second. Oh, yeah.
Seconded by Councillor Fulton. Any questions for Maxine? No, I think it's quite clear. It's been through the process and we moved it up to
so the
council.
amendments, had that amendment in there. That was,
Councillor Skinner? You've got an amendment?
have an amendment. There's one I emailed through that last meeting. I'm happy to email it through.
Oh, right, thank you. Let's take a little pause.
Well, would staff still have it on there? Look it up.
Seem to get a little bit of advice, but if you can send that through Councillor Skinner, and then we'll work from there.
Are you looking for it there, are you?
It's at the Environment and Climate Committee. We're just wondering
It's in the government
procedurally
side,
whether
yeah.
we can do this.
Yeah. It was for the Environment Committee. It was the Environment Committee meeting. It was the one that we went through and we went 6 all, and it was to re-put it. We'll go for. Correct. That's right. When it goes to full council, can you not? Okay. Your advice on that?
We're going to have to adjourn for a couple of minutes. It's just a little procedural matter that the governance advisors need to give some advice on. Have a little stretch and we'll be back in a few minutes. We are away. Right, we're back in session. We've got an amendment, additional clause proposed by Councillor Skinner, showing on the screen there. Well, Councillor Skinner, do you want to speak briefly to the additional clause? And we'll need a seconder too. So you want to add that in? So seconded by Councillor Brand, moved by Councillor Skinner, seconded by Councillor Brand to, is this an amendment? It is an amendment.
There's an amendment.
Yep, thank you.
So thank you, Madam Mayor. And as you recall, this was something that came up in our Environment Committee to go to full council. At the time, we didn't have many attending. I think there were 3, possibly 4 councillors weren't at that Environment Committee. So it was an opportunity for those two, whether they want to take that addition or not. And the reasoning was, I mean, there's a fair bit of discussion and good report from staff in regards to what we can and can't do for the Nelson Plan. And as you know, by pausing this Nelson Plan, it's concerning to me because it's very important, probably one of the most important pieces of work we do as a local council for the well-being of our community. And of course, it was disappointing that we sort of feeling a bit under-resourced to do some of it, and we're looking at pausing it. Apart from it, A, B, C, and D, and E, which are considering to continue. And I'm saying we should also keep updated with and be able to continue in regards to our air quality plan and boundary rules. It's not saying that we make it stronger or lesser. We made some great gains in our air plan that last term when we got that through with the community consultation, and I know the government are looking at making some changes, but I want to make sure that when those changes come in from the government, whether it's more restrictive or more allowing, whichever way you feel it should go, that we are enabled as a council with our feet on the ground, ready to make the changes what's best for the community. So it's not predetermining whether to make it lesser or greater, but those changes, and of course, the idea is in the areas of the shared boundary rules and the framework for their plan. I think we'd be disappointed to lose all that information and knowledge that we've gained and put on the back burner and then not being able to undertake it when it comes about. So it's not about undertaking it right now. You'll see it's subject to resourcing and being responsive to continue this when it comes about. So it's keeping the eye on hot. Thank you.
All right, so we had this was debated at the Environment and Climate Committee. So if anyone wasn't there and they've got questions, then they're welcome to ask them today. Councillor Laurie.
Was there, but I would like to ask a question that I asked, I think, last time or similar to the staff, and that is, how is our air plan working at the moment?
Through the chair, the air plan's been performing very well in terms of delivery of improvements to air quality across the district. In fact, there have been some phenomenal improvements in air quality in terms of the results that we've seen through the monitoring for the past few years.
So through the chair, does the staff think we should just keep going with things where they are?
I find that it's a little bit difficult to answer because, there's some valid points that Councillor Skinner's making. The reason we haven't listed all of the matters that we could and should be continuing to work on is really a priorities and an issue with capacity and resourcing. So what we have put forward on that list is the list of items that we've understood to be, key priorities for the council in terms of what we think we can achieve with the limited resourcing and the demands and changes that are happening. So there is some merit, and we would still be required as a national environmental standard to look at how that will apply to our region. That'll be an obligation if it comes through as a new standard. So there will be work on that done anyway. It's just really whether it's one of the listed items that we respond and report to as we keep working through and reporting back to this council.
Thank you. I'm going to speak in support of this amendment. I think Nelson City Council has been an absolute leader when it's come to air quality and moving forward under the Resource Management Act, and I'd like us to be really well prepared when we eventually do receive the new NES. And I'd say, how are we performing? Look, on PM10s, we're doing really well. On 2.5s, I don't think we know. We just don't have that data. If we think about the impact from our transport network, those small, that's where we just don't have. And I think there'll be a fair call, Maxine. she's nodding here. We're not in that space. Now, I think we need to make sure that we are. This air quality, it's absolutely about people's lives. It's about well-being, it's around health, that is such an important area, and we have led the way in New Zealand, and I'd like us to continue to be in a position to do that. I'm absolutely acknowledging that picking priorities is a tough ask, and what the officers have done is they've lined up those up with the critical priorities that we've set in the long-term plan. But I would just be absolutely remiss sitting here in this chair today if I did not keep the legacy of former councillor Eric Davey moving forward into this next generation of plans, because his work, as I said at the Environment and Climate Committee, has saved lives, many, many lives, and I want to make sure that we continue with that. Councillor Fulton.
I had a quick question, and I might have asked it last time, but I can't remember. We did a review recently, and we relaxed some of our rules to allow for ultra low emission burners into some of our air sheds. And there was a number, I can't remember if it was 500 or 1,000. Have we reached capacity in terms of that?
Sorry, I'm not going to allow that question today because it's not directly related to the matter in front of us today. I can't get into that level of detail at this stage, Councillor Fulton.
I guess I'm just wondering why we're needing to do this again, because I feel like we've just done it. Why we're needing to
because we're doing a full plan review, and every element of the plan will have to be prepared for the new plan.
But I do feel like we have just done this piece of work.
We've certainly haven't done the work on 2.5s. Or got a way to go. Okay, any other debate? Councillor O'Neill Stevens, Councillor Laurie, and then I'm going to get to pop the amendment.
Yes, look, I really appreciate what you've said, Madam Mayor, and what Councillor Skinner said. However, I'm not going to support this at this time. I think that collecting data on 2.5 is a great idea, but what this resolution is specifically about is the planning framework for the air plan and airshed boundary rules. I think, frankly, it would be a bit of crystal ball gazing. We know that the NES for air quality is coming, and we do know that we've got a pretty good idea what direction that's heading in terms of whether the standards are going to be looser or higher. And it'll probably be higher, but just what those specifics are, we don't know. And so I struggle to see especially when we have such key work around housing, which needs to be progressed. And I just don't want us to lose focus on those key issues. We last reviewed our air quality plan in 2018. And so it's much fresher than a lot of the other provisions we have. And we have massively seen improvements in our air quality, and it does need to continue to improve. But if we're weighing that up against something else that we know is taking lives, which is a lack of housing and low quality housing, I think we've got a much bigger, more prescient issue. Whereas with this piece of work, as soon as that NES is out, we can pick that up and we can run with it with the knowledge of what it actually looks like, as opposed to diverting, potentially losing some focus now to try and guess what that eventually looks like.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie, and then Councillor Brandon, then I'm going to put the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm speaking against the amendment. As we've just heard, and we heard at the Environment and Climate Committee meeting, the plan as it stands is getting phenomenal results. There are plenty of things that council are doing which where we're not seeing phenomenal results, particularly in housing. I absolutely agree about the importance of air quality. I believe that the improvement in air quality in Nelson over the last, say, 15 years has been the unheralded achievement of a generation. But what I'm concerned about is that E is actually pushing for a future where we have more log burners, and anyone who looks at particularly Nelson South in winter right now will see smog still being caused by log burners. So I'm very wary of E. I think Councillor O'Neill Stevens summed it up very well as well, and I would like us to stick with the plan that's getting phenomenal results.
Point of order. Madam Mayor, there's nothing in there about increasing amount of wood burners, or nothing in my statement or in that statement saying increasing
I
wood
said
burners.
that through the chair. What's the point of order?
Misinformation, misleading.
Misinformation. So that's my opinion.
To wait while I rule on the point of order.
Thanks.
Just have to restate the words again, Councillor Skinner, that you feel are a misrepresentation of something you've said.
Increasing the amount of wood burners. The amendment was my amendment was there for increasing the amount of wood burners. It was
Thank
not.
you. I'm going to uphold the point of order. Continue on.
Okay. So as I said though, my concern is that that is where E will take us. And I'm entitled to have that concern. So like I said, I think we should continue with the plan that's getting phenomenal results. We should concentrate on the things that actually really need our focus. And it's pretty simple, really. Yeah.
Councillor Brand.
Sorry, my voice is starting to reach its limit, so I'll keep it brief. I have a concern, but completely opposite to why Councillor Laurie has the concern. My concern is for when people look at housing and they rate their health, the airshed is something that they do weigh up, and they also weigh up the level of traffic that is around that area, because traffic also impacts on the airsheds. And with Nelson City Council focused on housing and intensification and stuff, I feel that the airshed should actually stay as a priority and therefore be up there to help those people identify the areas that they would like to live. So therefore, I support this up.
I'm going to have a division, I think, on that amendment.
Division's been called.
So we're just doing E in front of you. Councillor Bowater.
Yes.
Councillor Brand.
Yes.
Councillor Courtney. Aye. Councillor Edgar's an apology. Councillor Fulton.
No.
Councillor Laurie.
No.
Councillor McGurk.
No.
Councillor Noonan.
Aye.
Councillor O'Neill Stevens.
No.
Councillor Rainey's an apology. Councillor Sanson.
No.
Councillor Skinner.
Aye.
Madam Mayor.
Aye. The amendment is carried, 6 votes in favour, 5 opposed and 2 apologies. All right, we're now at the substantive. Don't think we need any further debate on that one. It's been moved and seconded. Maxine, I just want to, as I did at the Environment and Climate Committee, really acknowledge the enormous amount of work that you and the team have put into developing our plan and keeping this program moving along with a fair number of challenges. This is a major legislation reform that is proposed, and it's a very, very difficult decision, I know, to say, look, we're going to take a different approach. But I'm really grateful for the team on highlighting this critical work and making sure that we're in the best position possible that we can to move forward through the legislation changes. It may come to the point where we have to do a partial plan change under the RMA because we're still in the transition process, but we'll just have to see how that plays out over the next 12 months to 3 years, to 5 years, to 8 years, depending on how this goes. We'll have to see what happens. So I'm going to put the motion, all those in favour. Aye, against, carries. Now, I do believe that might conclude what was supposed to be quite a reasonable council day last Wednesday, sort of ticked off in a morning. That's now I come back for another morning. Nice to see you all for this council meeting. We've got another council meeting today, but we're going to have a lunch break. And some of you may not be able to come back this afternoon. So if you're not able to come back, apologies from Councillor Noonan. Just want to make sure I've got a quorum. So everyone else is all right to come back. Fantastic. Councillor Rainey is an apology for the rest of the day. Do we know, or is he? I'm not sure. Okay, don't know.
He may be able to join us on Zoom.
Oh, okay. All right, we'll wait and see what he decides to do. All right, so we will now close this meeting. Tuya? Yeah, all right, let's do Tuya. Come on, we'll do Tuya. All right, so off we go. Closing with karakia. Two.
Tuya, Karonga.
Thank you all for joining us today. We will be resuming in an hour for the next meeting, so we'll be starting at 1:30.